Chapter 3:15. The fire lotus rose in spirals, accompanied by the gurgling of scarlet bubbles. When its roots emerged from the magma, its petals rapidly bloomed, revealing the fire elite zombie at the center of the stamen. This big-headed fire elite zombie's skin was so red that it looked as if it was about to drip blood. His lower body was wrapped in flower pistils. His upper body was covered in dark red flower buds like armor, covering his entire body except for his cheeks. The exposed fire elite zombie rapidly twisted his body within the stamen. Gradually, the stamen at the center of his waist slowly shrank its petals. The dazzling red petals of the bewitching fire lotus tightly closed and shrank, condensing into the armor on the fire elite zombie's lower body and legs. During this process, the enormous yuan energy of fire in the entire place of extreme fire gathered towards the fire elite zombie amidst the explosions of the surrounding formations. The yuan energy of fire condensed into sparks that filled the sky, flowing into the fire elite zombie's body like a river of stars. A scorching high temperature was transmitted from the fire elite zombie's body as a lotus pattern gradually formed between his eyebrows. It slowly turned from blurry to clearer and clearer, ultimately becoming the shape of a fire lotus that was shrunk 100 times and imprinted in the center of the fire elite zombie's eyebrows. The large fire lotus that enveloped the fire elite zombie gradually shrank and disappeared. By the time the lotus imprint between the fire elite zombie's eyebrows had formed, the fire lotus beneath him had completely disappeared without a trace. The fire elite zombie's scarlet eyes fell on Han Shua's body. His large head swayed a bit, and he suddenly opened his mouth to take a deep breath. The raging flames that were still frantically corroding Han Shua's body turned into rays of fiery light that entered his mouth as he took a deep breath. As his throat trembled, all of the flames entered his stomach. The solid ice that covered his entire body remained firm due to the disappearance of the raging flames. Seeing that the fire elite zombie had emerged, Han Shua did not continue to incessantly circulate his magical yuan, but instead gradually rose towards the crack. After the fire elite zombie emerged from the lotus, the Lord of the Flames, who had been roaring incessantly, stopped howling and focused all its attention on the fire elite zombie. When the lotus imprint formed between the fire elite zombie's eyebrows, the fire elite zombie's scarlet eyes met the Lord of the Flames. Through this communication, he seemed to be narrating something to the Lord of the Flames, causing the raging Lord of the Flames to slowly calm down. As Han Shua gradually floated up to the crack, he sensed that the entire place of extreme fire was brimming with motherly love. The Lord of the Flames completely relaxed. The enormous Lord of the Flames held the fire elite zombie in its palm, communicating something in a mysterious manner. Since the fire elite zombie had already emerged, Han Shua knew that the fire elite zombie would definitely follow his aura due to the restrictions of the demonic attack and the connection of his blood essence. Not to mention that this fire elite zombie had been brought here by Little Skull from another dimension. Even though it had been refined by the demonic attack and possessed a higher level of awareness and intelligence, the imprint deep within its soul hadn't changed much. Han Shua wasn't the slightest bit worried that the fire elite zombie wouldn't recognize him as its master. Since the Lord of the Flames didn't try to kill him again, Han Shua could easily leave. He basically didn't encounter any obstructions along the way, and Han Shua soon arrived at the center of the valley. Han Shua, who had originally thought that they wouldn't be able to detect him, could only jump out of the shade pathetically. While defending against the various attacks, an icicle arrow hit Han Shua's thigh. There was also a thunderball that exploded, and the scattered lightning affected Han Shua. Han Shua felt numb all over, and all the hair that had just grown stood on end. "Kill him, he's been hit," the thief yelled. The priest finished a lengthy incantation, and 3 dazzling rays of light shone on the 3 swordsmen. The 3 swordsmen were enchanted with strengthened armor, God's blessing, and bull's strength. The 3 rays of light circulated on their chests, and the 3 swordsmen aggressively charged at Han Shua. What a terrifying adventurer team! Han Shua was shocked. He quickly retreated into the dense forest behind him, and with the help of his high-speed movement, he quickly left the 3 swordsmen who were enchanted with support spells behind him. He waited for an opportunity to find a better way to attack. This adventurer team must have been tempered for a long time. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to have such tacit cooperation. They trusted each other very much, and when the priest, mage, swordsman, and thief worked together, they released a huge amount of energy. This gave Han Shuo, who had thought that he could easily deal with them, a headache. The three swordsmen, who had been enchanted with support spells by the priest, each had a level of strength. Even if all three of them faced Han Shuo at the same time, Han Shuo was confident that he could kill them in a few minutes. However, the surrounding mages, who were eyeing him covetously, wouldn't let him succeed. If the three mages, who had the priest constantly replenishing their mental strength, were to keep casting spells on him, Han Shuo wouldn't be able to withstand it. After concealing himself, Han Shuo calculated in his heart and discovered that there weren't any light mages in this team of adventurers. He immediately took the opportunity to summon many necromancers and cast the canopy of necromancy. After the Wood Elite zombie came out, it used its control of the forest under Han Shuo's orders to entangle the thief who was hiding on top of a large tree. However, the soft branches became a lethal weapon, instantly piercing through the thief's body. Katie. The adventurer team had formed a defensive formation. When the priest saw that the thief had been pierced by the branches, he screamed in rage. This priest was a woman in her 30s, and seemed to be a couple with the thief. The sudden death of the thief was a huge blow to the priest. "There's a druid here, be careful." Fire Grand Magus Marceau also yelled angrily before hurriedly reminding everyone. The three swordsmen on the ground hurriedly waved their heavy swords when they heard this, clearing all the trees and weeds around them. Although they were angry, they still looked around vigilantly. The priest, who couldn't find a target to fight with, fell into Marceau's magic barrier and started cursing in grief and indignation. He crazily released probing magic one after another. So many people. The priest who had released probing magic sensed that there were suddenly many densely packed people in all directions. This caused the furious priest to sober up a lot as he looked around and murmured. "How many people? How many people?" Fire Grand Magus Marceau was anxious and hurriedly asked. "Many, very many," the priest replied. He immediately looked at the thief's corpse and begged Marceau, "Get his corpse first, hurry. Take Katie's corpse and leave immediately." "Damn it, I remember now, he's also a necromancer." Fire Grand Magus Marceau yelled loudly. The three swordsmen rushed towards the dead thief without a care for anything else. Numerous undead creatures slowly appeared in the dense forest accompanied by rustling sounds. Among them, there was an evil knight riding a fire-breathing skeleton warhorse. He raised a 2-meter-long bone spear high in the air, his cold and emotionless gaze landing on the three swordsmen. Behind the evil knight, there were 10 or so hate creatures with rotting bodies swaying about. They were either holding huge wooden sticks or spiked maces. Under the control of the aura of death, they gradually surged towards the group of adventurers in the center. As more and more undead creatures appeared, the hearts of Marceau and the others sank. When a swordsman got the thief's corpse, Fire Grand Magus Marceau of the Brute Merchant Alliance said, "I'll lead the way, let's leave immediately." 6 fire serpents danced in the air, the surging flames bringing with them a scorching heat. To undead creatures, fire was something that was extremely annoying and unbearable. The high temperature would burn their cold bodies uncontrollably. When the dense aura of death completely melted in the blazing flames, their souls would also follow the flames into the endless abyss. Therefore, when the 5 fire serpents danced and shot towards the path blocked by 2 hate warriors, the 2 hate warriors instinctively retreated, unwilling to endure the pain of the flames. When Han Shuo gave the order again, the hate warriors approached the flames once again. The high-level evil knight even charged towards the flames, killing towards the adventurers. Undead creatures were naturally afraid of fire, but the higher the level, the less of a fear they had towards fire. The hate warriors could only barely withstand the burning flames, but the evil knight was no longer afraid of fire. Under Han Shuo's order, he actually directly charged towards the flames. Not far away, a streak of fiery light arrived with a bang. Some of the surrounding low-level skeletons and zombies were all turned into ashes by the intense flames. Even the hate warriors couldn't help but retreat, no longer daring to approach that patch of fiery light. Within the flames, the big-headed fire elite zombie couldn't control the flames on his body well, thus causing the deaths of the surrounding undead creatures. However, he took Han Shua's order as an imperial edict. He opened his mouth wide and swallowed all of the fire serpents Marceau had shot out, causing Marceau to be unable to use the flames to escape from the undead creatures. Chapter 317. What is that? Fire Grand Magus Marceau was shocked by the sudden appearance of the fire elite zombie and immediately cried out in alarm. The big-headed fire elite zombie grinned at Marceau after swallowing the monstrous flames. He then opened his mouth and spat out a few burning fire snakes. The fire snakes that were spat out by him were no longer under the control of Fire Grand Magus Marceau. They danced in the air and tangled with the rest of the party. The surrounding low-level undead creatures instinctively retreated under the roasting of the flames. Clusters of lotus petal-like flames seemed to be burning on the fire elite zombie's body. His bright red armor shot out red light in all directions, and the skeletal warriors were quickly reduced to ashes when they came into contact with the sparks. The fire snakes that the fire elite zombie spat out were even more powerful. Not only did the adventurers, led by Marceau, have to continuously dodge, even the undead creatures had to retreat. The evil knights and abominations also sensed the threat and hurriedly distanced themselves from the flames. "Idiot, you can't even tell the difference between us." Han Shua scolded in a low voice and gave the earth and wood elite zombies an order. The earth rumbled as the ground beneath the three swordsmen's feet undulated. Sharp earth spikes shot out one after another. The branches of the trees in the distance danced wildly, turning into deadly arrows that shot towards the adventurers with whooshing sounds. The fire elite zombie directly rushed towards the three swordsmen like a huge piece of soldering iron, creating torrential flames in front of the three swordsmen. The three swordsmen's bodies were touched by a single spark, and their bodies quickly burned. The huge bone spurs in the evil knight's hands flew into the air one by one. The priests and mages who were hastily dealing with the tree branches were able to resist the attacks of the tree branches, but they couldn't avoid the huge bone spurs of the evil knights. Han Shua's demon's lair edge also left his hand amidst the sky full of arrows. Mournful howls suddenly rang through the sky, and then abruptly stopped. In just a few breaths of time, the lives of all the adventurers in the sky had been ended, except for Fire Grand Magus Marceau. Marceau panted heavily as she looked at Han Shua with resentment. When she realized that all her companions were dead, she took out a magic scroll and started chanting a lengthy spell. An intense mana fluctuation came from the magic scroll. The space in front of Marceau distorted, and a long, sharp blade took shape in the sky. The terrifying spatial fluctuations condensed dense mana, and dazzling rays of light shot out in all directions. "Not good, it's the space blade." Han Shua had a flash of inspiration as he suddenly recalled the terrifying space element forbidden spell, Space Blade. He was immediately shocked and hurriedly chanted the spell. While sending several strange undead creatures to the other world, he tried to escape the cutting of that space blade. That space blade was a forbidden spell in the space element. Legend had it that it could cut through all hard objects. Han Shua had never thought that Marceau would have such an incomparably precious forbidden spell scroll. He immediately retreated without regard for anything else when he sensed that a long, narrow, and sharp blade had appeared in the space around him. A 20-meter-long beam of white light came crashing down from the sky. Wherever it passed, any hard rock, including the black armor of the evil knights that was comparable to iron, was cut in half like tofu. Towering old trees that were more than 10 meters tall suddenly broke apart after the white light flashed, and a bottomless gully appeared in the ground. Nearly 100 undead creatures were all cut to pieces by the white light. Not a single one was able to escape the cutting of the white light. Marceau continued chanting the lengthy spell with the magic scroll in hand. She used the incomparably precious forbidden spell scroll to release 3 more beams of white light that were more than 10 meters long. Wherever the white light passed, the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Even more undead creatures were cut apart in an instant. One of the beams of white light that was more than 10 meters long appeared in the air and came crashing down on Han Shua's head. The speed of the space blade was as fast as lightning, and it instantly fell on top of Han Shua's head. Marceau was determined to eliminate Han Shua, so all her attention was focused on the space blade. Therefore, the space blade was not only fast, but also accurate. It didn't seem to give Han Shua any chance to escape. Using the speed of the art of the demonic ninth heavens, Han Shua flew all the way to the lush forest behind him, constantly changing his position in an attempt to avoid being cut by the space blade. However, the space blade followed him like a shadow under Marceau's control. It also changed directions to chase after Han Shua. It seemed that it wouldn't give up until it cut down Han Shua. Cursing in his heart, Han Shua dove headfirst into a swamp. His body then shook, and a mud-covered Han Shua shot out of the swamp, heading deeper into the forest. Poof! The space blade came crashing down and cut the mud-covered Han Shua in two. The remaining power of the space blade didn't diminish in the slightest as it penetrated deep into the ground, once again creating a bottomless gully. Oh, he's finally dead. Marceau breathed out heavily and looked at the magic scroll that had lost all of its magic. Her heart ached as she murmured, I wasted such a precious magic scroll. What a difficult guy to deal with. While Marceau was paying attention to the magic scroll in her hand, the mud in the swamp mixed with the dirty water and fell into the bottomless gully. Then, a figure covered in mud moved. A cold light suddenly flashed and pierced through Marceau's body. Marceau's mind was a bit muddled due to the immense pain, but she saw a figure in the mud in front of her sway. The mud shook off and revealed Han Shua's appearance. Another demon wasted. This space blade is really powerful. It even tore apart the formless demon. Han Shua also cried out in heartache. He then flew towards Marceau, stripping off the dead adventurer's equipment and rings along the way and putting them into his own space ring. When he arrived in front of Marceau, Han Shua put away her magic staff and her space ring without any trace of politeness. This Marceau was able to possess a forbidden magic scroll, which meant that she was definitely a rich and overbearing person. A fire grand magus could easily obtain glory, splendor, wealth, and promotion in any country. Marceau was naturally no exception in the Brute Merchant Alliance. The ground was littered with broken bones and minced meat. More than half of the undead creatures that Han Shua had summoned had been killed by the space blade. Under Han Shua's timely protection, the fire, earth, and wood elite zombies were the first to be sent to the other dimension, and all of them escaped the attack of the space blade. The undead creatures had no fear. These undead creatures all stood there, waiting for Han Shua's next order. Clutching Marceau's space ring in his hand, Han Shua frowned as he looked at the scene below. He took out the skeletal staff and sent the undead creatures back to the other dimension one by one. After doing all this, Han Shua raised his head and looked around. He discovered that under the attack of the forbidden magic, the space blade, there were several huge ravines in the surrounding 1.5 kilometers. All the towering trees and rocks had been shattered. It was simply a mess. It was unknown whether it was because Marceau's mental strength was insufficient, or because the magic stored in the magic scroll itself was insufficient, but this forbidden magic scroll of the space blade could only display 30% of its true power. If the full power of the space blade was released, at least 20 space blades would appear. The number of space blades could increase according to the strength of the caster's mental strength. If it was released by a powerful space sacred magus, then basically all life within a small city would be chopped into pieces by the space blade. It possessed terrifying destructive power in all aspects. Clutching the space ring that Marceau had left behind before her death, Han Shua thought of a way to open it as he flew unhurriedly towards the cemetery of death. During this process, Han Shua used the only demon to discover that there was a team of more than 5,000 people stationed on the outskirts of the dark forest. Through the demon's observation, Han Shua discovered that this team of more than 5,000 people was actually a regular army of knights from the Brute Merchant Alliance. Some of the tents were blocked by magic boundaries, faintly exuding powerful auras. Frowning slightly, Han Shua observed for a while and thought of Marceau and those adventurers who had just died at his hands. He suddenly felt that they should be together with this group of people. Fire Grand Magus Marceau was a member of the Brute Merchant Alliance. The three swordsmen among the adventurers had the same sword and shield pattern on their left shoulders as the knights resting, indicating that they were definitely from this army of knights. The Brute Merchant Alliance was quite a distance away from the Dark Forest. After passing through the Dark Forest, one could directly reach the city of Zajoski in the southwest of the Lancelot Empire. This group of knights was well equipped and accompanied by some even more powerful experts. It was unknown why they would appear in the Dark Forest. After patrolling one round, Han Shuo was inwardly shocked by this team and discovered that their strength was a bit more powerful than what he had seen. The magical undulations in the center of the tent were strong and strange sounds could be faintly heard. After Han Shuo released his consciousness, he felt that something was wrong. He thought for a while and decided to see what these people were planning to do. Chapter 318. "Whoa!" An ear-piercing scream rang out from that tent. This scream was so shrill that even the magical boundary couldn't completely block the sound waves from leaking out. With his sensitive senses, Han Shuo could faintly hear some lingering sounds. The remaining Yin demons slowly probed in that direction. However, before the Yin demon neared that area, Han Shuo sensed a magical ripple spreading out like water ripples. With his extraordinary knowledge, Han Shuo immediately realized that this was a soul-searching spell. He hurriedly recalled the Yin demon from that area. After the soul-searching spell, a dazzling crack suddenly split open in the sky, like a bright eye surveying the surrounding area. Han Shuo immediately held his breath and focused, his entire person sinking into a realm where there were no ripples whatsoever. His body was tightly wrapped in the branches and leaves of a large, lush tree. The soul-searching magical ripple floated out like water ripples. When it passed by Han Shuo, he only felt a slight chill on his body. Han Shuo, who had his consciousness locked, easily avoided this soul-searching spell. "There's someone." Suddenly, a soft cry rang out from within the tent. A shadow darted out of the tent like lightning. A squad of knights followed closely behind the expert who had come out of the tent, quickly chasing towards the east. Rustling sounds quickly traveled from that area. Han Shuo could clearly hear that someone was quickly leaving the area where the knights were stationed. It looked like someone was also paying attention to the Brute Merchant Alliance's knights. However, they didn't seem to have concealed themselves well, and had been discovered. Han Shuo remained where he was, not moving an inch. His eyes traversed the long distance and landed on a few tents in the center. The Yin demon that had just been recalled was released once again, flying towards the direction of the sound. What were these Brute Merchant Alliance knights doing in the Dark Forest? Han Shuo's heart was filled with questions. He looked at the tent in the center with glittering eyes and thought silently. Boom! A loud sound traveled from the direction that the shadow had dashed towards. A strange, owl-like cackle rang out. "Ha ha, who would have thought that it would be two beauties? Don't even think of leaving. Cecilia, you go first. I'll stop him." A familiar female voice came from afar. Han Shuo, who was coldly staring at the tent, immediately changed his expression when he heard this voice. His originally calm heart was instantly broken. His whole body shot out like a sharp arrow, like a rainbow piercing through the sun, drawing a silver line in the sky, directly falling in that area. Han Shuo had heard Emily's voice many times. The voice just now was obviously from Emily. If it was someone he didn't know, Han Shuo naturally wouldn't poke his nose into other people's business. However, since Emily was in that area, Han Shuo absolutely wouldn't let anything happen to her. "You want to run? TSK, you can't run away." The hideous cackle of a night owl sounded once again from afar, accompanied by the roar of weapons clashing and magic explosions. The anxious Han Shuo circulated the art of the demonic ninth heavens to the extreme, arriving in that area in the span of 3 breaths. He was much faster than the Yin demons. The trees in the center of that area had been broken. Emily and Cecilia wore loose green robes, and their delicate faces were smeared with green plant sap. They seemed to have become one with the forest as they leaned against a large tree and continuously cast magical incantations. A few members of the Dark Mantle had been blessed by Cecilia with magic that increased physical strength, agility, and strength. They resisted the attacks of the brute Merchant Alliance knights without a care for their own safety. One of them was a skinny middle-aged man with short, red hair. With a cruel smile on his face, he stood behind the knights with his hands clasped behind his back. As he watched Emily and Cecilia resist, he couldn't help but let out a strange laugh. "Who is it?" The skinny middle-aged man suddenly sensed Han Shua's speed and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He raised his left hand and a complicated magical matrix actually formed in his palm. A powerful force surged out from his palm and directly bombarded the rapidly approaching Han Shua's body. Bang! As if he had collided with an iron mountain, Han Shua felt dizzy. He glared at the middle-aged man with an ominous glint in his eyes, but his body was unable to move forward. "Eh!" The middle-aged man cried out in surprise. His gaze, which had originally been focused on Emily and Cecilia, fell on Han Shua. The lines on his palm wriggled like snakes, and a trace of blood faintly appeared. Roar! When Han Shua waved the demon's lair edge and a soaring killing intent pervaded the entire scene, the middle-aged man suddenly roared towards the sky. His originally ordinary body that was only 1.75 meters tall began to strangely expand and undergo an unimaginable transformation. His smooth skin was covered by furry fur. His slender arms became incomparably thick and his 1.75-meter height increased by 10 meters. He had become an enormous black bear. The giant black bear suddenly pressed down with its huge paw amidst its roar, fiercely slamming down towards Han Shua. Han Shua, who was about to fly into the air, suddenly staggered. He felt that the gravity around him had suddenly increased by 10 times. Han Shua, who hadn't adapted yet, felt extremely uncomfortable. Brian. Emily, who was in the middle of casting dark magic, finally saw Han Shua's presence. She screamed in panic when she saw the giant black bear's mountainous paw coming down. Han Shua, whose movements had been affected, thought rapidly in the face of such a crisis. Magical yuan wildly flowed into the demon's lair edge when he saw the giant paw coming down. The demon's lair edge, having absorbed an enormous amount of resentment and killing intent from the souls, exploded with a blood-red light that soared into the sky. Clouds of blood mist floated out, turning into blood-red threads that wrapped around the demon's lair edge. A glaring red light suddenly shot out from the demon's lair edge. The vicious killing intent entangled with the boundless resentment of the souls stabbed towards the giant black bear's descending paw. The gray eyes of the giant black bear twitched at this moment. The hairs on the giant black paw stood up like steel needles. Waves of light shot out from the palm, like the rapid ripples produced by a giant rock thrown into a pond. Rumble, an enormous sound came from the clash between the demon's lair edge and the giant black bear's paw. Blood-red light shot out in all directions, accompanied by the giant black bear's miserable howl of pain. A force that could topple mountains and overturn the seas suddenly surged forth, pressing Han Shua directly into the ground. There was no technique involved in this enormous force, it was purely based on brute force. Even Han Shua's body that was as hard as iron and stone couldn't withstand it. The veins in his right hand that held the demon's lair edge burst open. Damn it, what kind of person is this? Han Shua couldn't help but curse lowly. Han Shua's strength had increased greatly in the separate demon realm. Han Shua had thought that he wouldn't meet many people who could surpass him in strength. He hadn't expected that he would be injured again after being injured by Kos last time. Who are you? After one strike, the giant black bear shrank back into the skinny middle-aged man. However, the skinny middle-aged man's right palm was dripping with blood. He looked at Han Shua in shock, his face full of incredulity. Ignoring the skinny middle-aged man, Han Shua flew towards Emily after releasing the tenfold gravity. He shouted halfway, "Hurry and leave this place, another expert is approaching." Cecilia, one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, had seen the fight between Han Shua and the giant black bear from beginning to end. Her gaze towards Han Shua was a bit strange. When she heard Han Shua's shout, she suddenly shouted towards the front, "All of you, get back here." As soon as she finished speaking, Cecilia took out a magic scroll. Her slender arms shook the magic scroll, and a space gate appeared in front of Cecilia with a flash of white light. The Dark Mantle members who had been fighting with the Knights seemed to have long since anticipated Cecilia's move. They immediately abandoned their opponents and entered the space door one by one. Without waiting for Han Shuo to react, Emily grabbed Han Shuo's arm without the slightest scruple and also brought Han Shuo into the space door. Cecilia then jumped in as well. As if they were riding on a magical transportation matrix, a white light flashed. With a splash, everyone appeared in a small river. Like a drowned rat, everyone poked their heads out of the small river, each of them breathing in large mouthfuls of fresh air. "Brian, weren't you in Bretel City? Why are you here?" Emily had already let go of Han Shuo's arm at this time. She poked her head out of the small river and asked Han Shuo. It's very convenient for me to come here. You know that." Han Shuo winked at Emily and said in a low voice. Emily started and suddenly remembered the Cemetery of Death in the dark forest. With the Cemetery of Death's magic matrix, Han Shuo could easily run back and forth no matter where he was. "Damn it, how did it get here? Let's go, they'll chase after us." Cecilia's voice came from the distance at this moment. She was dripping wet from head to toe when she suddenly shouted. Following Cecilia's shout, Emily gave Han Shuo a meaningful look and immediately followed the Dark Mantle members out of the small river, walking in the direction of a forest troll. Chapter 319. Who was that just now? Han Shuo didn't forget to ask Emily about the origins of the skinny middle-aged man he'd just fought. Emily flew up from the river, her drenched body covered by a cloud of black smoke, revealing only her delicate face. The group followed behind her on the other side of the river. Cecilia's nimble figure was at the very front, while Emily and Han Shuo followed shoulder to shoulder. Behind them were some low-ranking Dark Mantle members. Emily turned back to glance at Han Shuo when she heard this and explained, "He's called Castle, a great druid who betrayed the Druidic Order. He's a very frightening expert. Although he can no longer use the power of nature because he betrayed the Order, he can still skillfully use the shape-shifting technique that only great druids can master. He can even use the gravity spell when he's just turned into an earthen bear. You're really getting stronger and stronger to be able to fight him head-on when he's turned into an earthen bear." When he heard that the other party was a great druid, Han Shuo suddenly recalled that great druid Caspian. He felt that Caspian was much weaker than Caspian in terms of strength. Caspian is also a great druid, why isn't he as strong as this Caspian? Han Shuo furrowed his brow and asked in confusion. Emily combed the hair covering her forehead and looked at Cecilia in front of her before continuing to explain, "Great druids can practice all kinds of miraculous techniques of the Druidic Order. Most druids can use the power of nature to manipulate plants. Legend has it that this ability was bestowed upon them by the goddess of nature. However, shape-shifting isn't that easy to master. Only a few exceptionally talented druids can successfully learn it. It looks like Caspian hasn't mastered shape-shifting, otherwise he wouldn't have been captured so easily in Valen City." Han Shuo finally understood after hearing Emily's words. He thought to himself that Caspian, who'd always served the goddess of nature, hadn't learned shape-shifting, but this traitor who'd betrayed the Druidic Order had learned it. This was a bit ironic. "Oh right, what mission do you have in the dark forest this time?" Han Shuo followed Emily unhurriedly as they walked deeper into the lush forest, continuing to ask Emily about her intentions this time. Cecilia, who was leading the way, suddenly flung her beautiful long hair. Sparkling water droplets rolled down her smooth hair like pearls. Cecilia's bright eyes glanced back at Emily and she snorted lightly, "Even without your help, we can still leave from there. I'm in charge of this mission, and Sister Emily has to listen to me. You're not part of this mission, so there's no need for you to know." Emily was about to respond when she heard Cecilia's words. She couldn't help but smile wryly apologetically at Han Shuo, "Since Madame Cecilia has spoken, there's nothing more I can say." "Sister Emily." Cecilia glared at Emily reproachfully before saying, "We need to be clear about public and private matters." Got it, got it." Emily yelled and smiled faintly at Han Shuo, "All right, don't ask any more. We'll be fine." If you have matters to attend to, go do what you need to do. Don't worry about us. Cecilia had obviously used magic scrolls to create the space door. However, with a magic scroll that could create a space door, it meant that even without Han Shua's appearance, Cecilia would still be able to easily leave with Emily and the others. This meant that Cecilia hadn't been saved by Han Shua. Although Han Shua was still a bit worried after hearing Emily's words, since Cecilia obviously didn't want him to help, Han Shua couldn't say much. Just as he was about to say a few words to Emily and leave the group, Han Shua suddenly realized that he had unknowingly followed Cecilia and the others to the forest trolls area. A dozen or so green-skinned troll warriors had already seen Cecilia in front of them. Without saying a word, they threw the sharp axes in their hands at Cecilia. Annoying forest troll, why are your weapons getting better and better recently? Cecilia drew an arc in front of her chest, activating a magic formation on her chest. A sparkling and beautiful blue ice shield emerged from the magic formation on her chest and flowed into the air. As soon as it came into contact with the air, it quickly cooled into an ice shield. The sharp axes thrown by the forest troll warriors smashed onto the blue ice shield with clanging sounds, but they only left a small mark on the ice shield. They had no way of penetrating the blue ice shield's defenses. This is the forest troll's territory. Let's hide here for a while. As long as the Redbud Knights arrive, those greedy forest troll will attack them without a care in the world. Although the Redbud Knights are one of the top 10 Knight Orders on the continent, their strength will be greatly reduced in the forest. This forest troll tribe isn't small, we can definitely cause some trouble for them. Even if the Redbud Knights completely annihilate them, we'll still be rid of a scourge for the dark forest. Cecilia's cool voice calmly narrated as she ran towards the forest troll throwing the sharp axes. She turned her head back to look at the Dark Mantle members with their faces covered in masks. She ordered, eliminate the forest troll sentries in front. Once the Redbud Knights arrive, the enraged forest troll will attack them with all their might. Not only will we be able to escape, we might even be able to pick up some benefits. As soon as Cecilia's words fell, several members of the Dark Mantle nimbly rushed out. These people had the strength of senior swordsmen at the very least. The forest trolls on sentry duty definitely wouldn't be able to withstand them. At this moment, Han Shua suddenly blocked their path with a gloomy face. He shouted in a low voice, "Take a detour. You can't touch those forest troll." The forest troll tribe could be said to be Han Shua's power. These forest troll, who served Little Skull like a demon named Dadera, obeyed Han Shua's every command. To Han Shua, this power was completely within his control. There were still many uses for it in the future. He absolutely couldn't let Cecilia use the Redbud Knights to exterminate the tribe. Any one of the top 10 Knight Orders on the continent was a truly high combat power that had gone through hundreds of battles. To be able to enter the ranks of one of the top 10 Knight Orders meant that they had experienced the trials of war. The Redbud Knights were one of the top 10 Knight Orders. As long as 100 of them came, the 500 forest troll warriors wouldn't be able to walk out of the village alive. Han Shua had heard that any one of the top 10 Knight Orders was extremely frightening. That was why he absolutely couldn't let Cecilia do this. Otherwise, the only path that awaited the forest troll was extermination. This was something Han Shua couldn't accept. They're just some greedy forest troll. Why are you protecting them? Are you crazy? Cecilia's crescent brows furrowed as she coldly shouted at Han Shua with displeasure. Hurry up and take a detour. I can feel the Redbud Knights approaching. These forest troll are useful to me. No one is allowed to touch them. Otherwise, don't blame me for offending my superiors. Han Shua stared coldly at Cecilia with a face that showed no room for negotiation. You are hindering our mission. As a member of the Dark Mantle, do you know that I have the right to punish you? Cecilia was also angered by Han Shua. She glared at Han Shua and shouted. Take a detour. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Han Shua wasn't afraid at all as he coldly snorted. Little sister Cecilia, let's take a detour. Consider it giving me face. Seeing that the two of them were at a stalemate, Emily hurriedly tugged at the corner of Cecilia's clothes and begged her. Cecilia had just seen that Han Shuo wasn't the slightest bit afraid of the great Earth Bear Castle. She understood that Han Shuo's strength was absolutely unfathomable. While the pursuers could catch up at any time, it wouldn't do her any good to fall out with Han Shuo. Cecilia, who was stuck between a rock and a hard place, swept an icy glance at Han Shuo after Emily's pleading, "I will demand an explanation from that old fox Candide. Let's go, we'll take a detour." Cecilia was the first to turn around and leave as soon as she finished speaking. Emily gave Han Shuo a meaningful glance and hastily chased after the furious Cecilia. The Dark Mantle members who had followed Cecilia on the mission glared at Han Shuo with unkind expressions and left one by one. Dadera, Dadera. After Cecilia's group left, the surrounding forest troll saw Han Shuo and suddenly surrounded Han Shuo, shouting loudly. The sound of footsteps quickly approached. The startled Han Shuo gestured with his hands and feet to forcefully drag the forest troll away from the area. Not long after Han Shuo left, the traitor of the Druidic Order, Castle, rushed over with 50 to 60 Redbud Knights. Although Castle had betrayed the Druidic Order, he still had his experience in the forest. Looking at the footprints in two different directions and sniffing the air, Castle pointed in the direction Cecilia's group had left in, saying, "Follow me, they left from here." "Humph, in this forest, no one can escape my pursuit." Chapter 320. Unable to communicate with the forest troll, Han Shuo didn't linger there. He didn't go to the forest troll's village to find the old priest who knew the common language. Instead, he went back the way he'd come, sneaking back to where the Redbud Knights were camped. Cecilia, who possessed the magic scroll to create a space door, might not be as strong as Castle's group, but it shouldn't be a problem for her to escape with her life. Han Shuo felt that something wasn't quite right with the Redbud Knights of the Brute Merchant Alliance appearing in the dark forest. Emily couldn't tell him the truth because of Cecilia, so Han Shuo decided to investigate on his own. Using the remaining Yin demon to scout the way, Han Shuo released his consciousness to sense all kinds of auras within a certain range. The noon sun shone tenaciously through the layers of leaves on the ground of the dark forest. At first glance, these tenacious rays of sunlight looked like a bunch of sharp arrows. Han Shuo, with his extremely sensitive senses, was like the most skilled hunter in the forest. His figure moved quickly without making a sound. With the help of his abnormal consciousness and the Yin demon, Han Shuo snuck back to the area where the Redbud Knights were camped in a few minutes. The knights that were scattered all over the place were resting lazily. They were squinting their eyes as they discussed some topics that were not suitable for children under the warm sunlight. From time to time, a few low and obscene laughter could be heard coming from the crowd. There were also some knights that were determined to train their chi alone. The magic barrier around the central tent hadn't been removed yet. Faint screams could be heard from inside, as if some criminals were being tortured and interrogated. Han Shuo patiently hid in the leaves of a large tree, observing the Redbud Knights. He used his powerful consciousness to cover the small area he was hiding in, preventing anyone from approaching or probing. A Yin demon silently roamed among the group of knights, eavesdropping on their conversations. Most of these knights were talking about some boring topics, however, some of them looked solemn as they were discussing some topics that should not be heard by Han Shuo. A Yin demon lurked securely around the knights who were discussing serious matters, slowly listening to their reflections on the mission this time. Through these people's nonchalant narration, Han Shuo gradually understood their purpose in coming to the dark forest this time. An indistinct magical pulse emanated from the tents in the center of the scattered knights. Another 3 soul-searching spells were released. Han Shuo, who had long since sensed it, hastily withdrew a Yin demon into his body and used magical yuan to completely conceal his presence. When the magical undulations from the 3 souls faded away, a gigantic sky eye appeared in the void above Han Shuo's head. The sky eye looked down for a while before gradually disappearing. Woo! A battle horn made of bull horns was suddenly blown. A loud shout came from the tent, "Assemble, prepare to depart." The lazily resting Redbud Knights immediately sprang to their feet when they heard the sound of the bugle horn. They began to tidy up their weapons and armor, full of energy as they walked towards the sturdy warhorses that were grazing and drinking water by the small river in the back. A vast and mighty aura of slaughter abruptly spread out. They were indeed worthy of being one of the top 10 knight regiments on the continent. Nothing could be seen when they were resting, but once they were ready to depart, that kind of valiant aura naturally emerged. Hidden in the foliage, Han Shuo was inwardly apprehensive as he watched the assembled Redbud Knights. He began to worry about the various races in the Dark Forest's underground world. The Redbud Knights had traveled thousands of miles into the Dark Forest this time in order to deal with the underground world. The underground world was rich in all kinds of strange ores and crystals and jades used to make magical weapons and protective gear. However, the exit from the underground world to the surface world was very well hidden. It was very difficult for people above ground to discover it. As a Grand Druid of the Druidic Order of the Dark Forest, Castle had always known about the entrance to the underground world from the Dark Forest. During one of his explorations in the underground world, he had inadvertently discovered that the lizard men had excavated a small magic crystal mine. The value of a magic crystal mine was very high. Out of greed, Castle had violated the Druidic Order's teachings and wanted to monopolize that small magic crystal mine. However, he had been chased out by an unknown powerful super-rank magical beast in the underground world while slaughtering the lizard men. Flustered and exasperated, Castle had returned to the Druidic Order in an attempt to use the Order's power to eliminate the lizard men and the powerful super-rank magical beast. Unfortunately, the peace-loving Druid Elder, who believed in the goddess of nature, had rejected Castle's proposal and even reprimanded him. Blinded by greed, Castle had angrily injured the elder Druid Elder who had reprimanded him and fled the Dark Forest under the Druidic Order's pursuit. He didn't know how he had hooked up with the Brute Merchant Alliance. The riches of the underground world and that small magic crystal mine had successfully aroused the interest of Kelt, the commander of the Redbud Knights of the Brute Merchant Alliance. In the end, under Kelt's leadership, the Redbud Knights had sent out all their elites and entered the Dark Forest after a long and arduous month of trekking. They planned to make a fortune in the underground world. Kelt's temples were grizzled white, and his weather-beaten face had many traces of time. The extremely tall Kelt's eyes were calm and gentle. If he didn't know his goal this time, Han Shuo would have found it very difficult to associate him with a greedy plunderer just from his appearance. After walking out of the central tent, Kelt took out a clean white handkerchief and carefully wiped the traces of blood on his hands. He looked at the assembled Redbud Knights and casually asked a young mage beside him, "Why hasn't Master Marceau returned yet?" "I'm sorry, I don't know why Master hasn't returned yet." The young mage was obviously a bit reserved in front of Kelt and hastily replied. Kelt casually threw away the blood-stained handkerchief and looked at his clean and slender hands with satisfaction. He said in a calm voice, "Forget it, Master Marceau already knows our destination this time. Since she can fly, she'll definitely rush back after finishing her business. Let's leave first." A resonant whistle suddenly came from Kelt's mouth. The ear-piercing whistle tore through the sky. Not long after, an enormous shadow gradually flew over from the distance. When it neared, Han Shuo discovered that it was actually a 20-meter-long green dragon. This green dragon was quite a bit larger than Gilbert. Not all species of dragons were measured by size, but green dragons happened to be one of those species where the larger their size, the stronger they were. A 20-meter-long green dragon was definitely a super-rank magical beast that had evolved twice. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to be so long. Kelt leapt 7 or 8 meters into the air. The green dragon gently landed so that Kelt could get on. Kelt was only 1.8 meters tall and only took up a small space on the 20-meter-long green dragon's body. However, the aura emanating from his body wasn't something that the green dragon's enormous body could conceal. Kelt, who was sitting on top of the green dragon, let out another long and loud roar. The green dragon carried him like a dark cloud that covered a large patch of the sky, rapidly flying into the distance. It seemed that they were heading in the direction that Castle was pursuing Cecilia's group. The Redbud Knights tidied up their tents under the leadership of a few senior captains. They mounted their warhorses and slowly headed in another direction. That was the entrance that Han Shuo had entered the underground world last time. No one would dare provoke such a powerful group even in the incomparably chaotic dark forest. The magical beasts in this area weren't low in intelligence, and certainly wouldn't come out to seek their own deaths. Therefore, the Redbud Knights were unruffled along the way and didn't encounter any obstructions as they headed towards that area. As they were leaving, several tents in the center were suddenly set ablaze by Marceau's students' fire magic. After the group left, Han Shuo flew up and saw that the charred corpses were lizardmen corpses. It looked like they were planning on obtaining some information from the lizardmen. Kelt had most likely left on his green dragon to find Castle. With Kelt's strength, if he joined the chase for Emily's group, Han Shuo was very worried that Cecilia wouldn't be able to easily escape even with the space door. After hesitating for a moment, Han Shuo decided to follow Kelt and see what was going on. At this moment, an enormous figure glittering with golden light flew in Kelt's direction like a long and narrow bolt of golden lightning. Han Shuo also heard a familiar angry roar. It's the golden dragon that was trapped in the forbidden area last time. He seems to be attacking Kelt. This is getting more and more interesting. Han Shuo saw the situation through the Yin demon and cried out in alarm as he quickly flew in that direction. Damned robber, how dare you steal my treasures while I'm not here? Hurry up and hand it all over. The golden dragon roared all the way and shouted at Kelt, who was riding on top of the green dragon. Lightning crackled as it twisted its enormous body and shot towards the green dragon. Chapter 321. This golden dragon from the depths of the dark forest was a thrice-evolved super-rank magical creature. Han Shuo had already deeply understood its strength last time. Golden dragons were known as the race with the strongest physical bodies among the dragon race. The aura of a rank 3 golden dragon was profound and heavy. As it twisted its enormous body in the air, streaks of lightning crackled as it struck the green dragon and Kelt. Kelt, the commander of the Redbud Knights, revealed a trace of surprise when he saw the golden dragon's overbearing momentum as it charged over. Bolts of lightning entangled them, but were deflected to the side with a breath from the green dragon beneath him. They weren't able to cause any harm to the green dragon and Kelt. Golden dragons were known as the strongest of the dragon race. Perhaps it was because of this that magic wasn't their domain of expertise. Even this thrice-evolved golden dragon's lightning attack was only equivalent to the attack of a lightning adept mage. This level of attack wasn't difficult for a super-rank magical creature like the green dragon to defend against. It only needed a breath to dispel the lightning attack. The enormous green dragon was a super-rank magical creature that had evolved twice. Unlike the golden dragon, the green dragon was more proficient in magic. Although it didn't have a body as hard as iron and stone, its magic could make up for some of the disadvantages of its physical body. Kelt slowly took out a slender silver dragon spear from atop the green dragon and pointed it at the golden dragon with a smile. "Honored golden dragon, I've already taken the treasures. If you want to take them back, it'll depend on whether or not you have the strength to do so. Pitiful human, you've offended me. I'll make you regret your greed." The approaching golden dragon roared loudly, his enormous body pressing down on Kelt. The golden dragon obviously realized that with the green dragon present, a simple magic attack wouldn't be able to kill Kelt. Therefore, he planned on using the tough bodies of the golden dragons to teach them a painful lesson. "Heh heh, foolish golden dragon, you're asking for trouble." Kelt laughed heartily as he raised his dragon spear. Silver fighting aura condensed on the tip of the spear, borrowing the momentum of the collision with the green dragon to stab at the golden dragon. Halfway through, Kelt suddenly put down his dragon spear and took out something, throwing it towards the sky. A black dragon net covered in sharp blades suddenly fell down on the golden dragon. The golden dragon's attention was focused on the dragon spear in Kelt's hands as he charged over. He didn't expect Kelt to suddenly throw out a dragon net. Caught off guard, he couldn't dodge in time and was immediately caught firmly in the dragon net. The black silk net was filled with sharp little blades, and as soon as it wrapped around the golden dragon, it abruptly tightened. The more the golden dragon's huge body twisted, the tighter the black silk wrapped around it. The little blades cut into the golden dragon's flesh between the cracks of its scales with clanking sounds. A strong magical wave suddenly came from the black dragon net, and rays of silver light shot out from the black net. The magical wave brought about by the silver light had the strange effect of preventing dragons from transforming and escaping. The golden dragon, who had been planning to transform and escape, was hit by the magical wave and immediately felt numb all over. He couldn't use his innate divine abilities. I've already warned you not to ask for trouble. This dragon net was made for me by the combined efforts of 3 great alchemists. Even a golden dragon shouldn't think of escaping from it. Kelt slowly approached the golden dragon on his green dragon with a modest smile on his face. He aimed the dragon spear in his hand at the golden dragon's enormous eyes within the black dragon net. Although the golden dragon's body was strong, its eyes were just as fragile. The golden dragon roared in grief and indignation when Kelt's dragon spear was aimed at its eyes. "Despicable human, fight me fair and square if you have the guts." "Ha ha, us humans rely on our brains." Kelt laughed and then looked at the golden dragon with interest for a while. Kelt joked to himself, "Oh, a rank 3 golden dragon's entire body is a treasure. How should I deal with you? Should I kill you and take away your dragon tendons, dragon bones, dragon eyes, and crystal core? Or should I make you one of my magical pets? Ha ha, I already have a green dragon. This is really making things difficult. Despicable human, if you can't defeat me fair and square, the proud golden dragon won't lower its head even if you kill me." Even at this point, the golden dragon was still shouting loudly without fear of death. Kelt's face suddenly turned cold when he heard this. He waved the dragon spear in his hand above the golden dragon's fist-sized eye and said, "I don't have much patience and don't want trouble. I'll give you one last chance. Immediately form a slave contract with me or die. I won't form a contract with such a despicable and treacherous human like you. Give up." The golden dragon began to struggle violently within the black silk net. The small blades of the net pierced deep into his flesh through the cracks in his scales, causing blood to drip down from the sky like a drizzle. This golden dragon was extremely strong. Han Shua had already seen it last time at the Lord of the Flames. However, the black dragon net had been made by 3 great alchemists and was specifically made to deal with giant dragons. Something that could be taken out by the commander of one of the 10 great knight regiments was naturally not an ordinary item. Even though the golden dragon struggled with all his might, it was to no avail. Not only did he change his position in the air, his injuries also worsened. "Very well, then go to hell." Kelt shouted lowly and thrust the dragon spear in his hand forward, stabbing it into the cracks in the golden dragon's scales. Due to the golden dragon's constant twisting of his body, the black silk net tightened around him and his injuries gradually worsened. However, Kelt couldn't easily stab his eyes, so he had no choice but to attack the dragon's body directly, stabbing his spear repeatedly into the dragon's body. No matter how strong the golden dragon's body was, he couldn't withstand such an attack that he couldn't even fight back. Blood poured out of his body as he howled in pain. "Despicable and cowardly human, you will definitely pay the price." The golden dragon continued to make a ruckus even as he howled in pain. "I can't see how you'll make me pay. Pitiful worm, your long life has finally come to an end today." Kelt chuckled softly, but the dragon spear in his hand didn't stop. He pulled it out of the dragon's body and stabbed it in again. There was an unconcealable excitement in his eyes as he looked at the bloody golden dragon. He subconsciously licked his lips, seemingly enjoying this moment very much. Suddenly, a streak of black light streaked across the sky and slid into the black dragon net that trapped the golden dragon like a nimble fish. The enormous dragon net was gradually torn to pieces by the black light's movement. "Who dares meddle in my business?" Kelt frowned as the excitement in his body receded like the tide. His eyes sparkled with a bright light as he looked around and snorted coldly. Roar! With the aid of a streak of black light, the black dragon net that was trapping the golden dragon was no longer able to restrain him. The golden dragon let out an extremely furious and mournful roar as he suddenly charged towards the green dragon without any hindrance. He used his sharp claws and teeth to viciously tear at the green dragon and Kelt without any fear of death. Due to the need to use the dragon spear to stab the golden dragon, Kelt was very close to him on his green dragon. The golden dragon that wasn't bound by the black silk dragon net almost immediately entangled the green dragon. The golden dragon that was riddled with scars actually stimulated his ferocity. He attacked frantically, ripping the green dragon's body apart and causing it to let out a mournful roar. Kelt was an enemy the golden dragon hated to the bone, but it was a pity that Kelt's movements were exceedingly nimble due to his small size. He continuously changed directions on the green dragon's enormous body, and the golden dragon's claws and teeth couldn't hit its target at all. Han Shua, who was hiding on top of an ancient tree below, looked coldly at the intense battle in the sky. Surging dragon breaths surged in all directions, causing the surrounding ancient trees and hills to rumble and explode. A streak of black light circled around the golden dragon's body and quickly disappeared into Han Shua's body. Ain Demon slowly drifted away, constantly paying attention to another lurker, the giant silver ape that had appeared last time at the Lord of the Flames. The giant silver ape had appeared when the golden dragon had been caught in the dragon net. The 4-meter-tall giant silver ape couldn't compare to the giant dragon in the sky, and it hid itself well within the lush shrubbery. At this moment, the giant silver ape had large mouthfuls of stinking, greedy liquid as it stared fixedly at the battle in the sky with its blood-red eyes. It seemed like it was ready to join in at any moment. Super-rank magical beasts could sometimes consume each other's flesh and digest their magical beast cores to increase their own strength and even directly evolve. Super-rank magical beasts of the same rank wouldn't normally fight to the death, but these savage super-rank magical beasts wouldn't hesitate at all if they had the chance to kill their opponent. To the giant silver ape, the two dragons fighting in the sky above him were perhaps another chance for him to quickly evolve, especially since the two dragons were fighting to the death. He knew that one of them would be the first to fall from the sky, and then his chance would come. Chapter 322. Roar. A long and mournful scream came from the mouth of the crazily twisting green dragon. The green dragon that was entangled by the golden dragon was obviously not a match for the golden dragon that was famous for its physical strength. Furthermore, this golden dragon had evolved 3 times. After being injured, it became even more ferocious and fearless. The golden dragon, who was entangled with the green dragon, used his steel-like body, sharp claws, and ghastly white mouth to leave deep wounds on the green dragon's body. The scales on the green dragon's body were effective in blocking ordinary arrows, but they were at a disadvantage when faced with the violent bites of the golden dragon, who was a level higher than it. Because the distance was too close, and the green dragon was entangled by the golden dragon, the green dragon couldn't open up a distance to use stronger magic to attack. Kelt's body swayed as the two dragons tore at each other. It was difficult for him to even stand, and even more difficult for him to attack. Despicable human, I said you would pay the price. The golden dragon let out a ferocious roar, and with a twist of its golden tail, the green dragon was flung out of the cage. The dizzy green dragon fell towards a hill in the distance under the strong force. His huge body looked like a huge green ribbon from afar, whistling all the way down. The giant silver ape had been lurking all this time, its blood-red eyes fixed on the green dragon. When the green dragon was about to hit the ground, the fur on its body suddenly stood on end, and it shot out like a bolt of silver lightning, sweeping towards the hill. Rumble, the green dragon's huge body fell onto the hill, flattening the hard rocks of the hill, which was only 10 meters tall, with a huge rumble that shook the earth and mountains. The golden dragon in the sky was still dripping with blood. He stretched his body high up in the sky, and his iron hook-like claws swiped at the howling green dragon below. Several green dragon breaths with a sour odor were suddenly spat out from the green dragon's mouth, which was also covered in wounds. The golden dragon hadn't completely landed when it was hit by the green dragon's breath, and its body suddenly swayed. It changed direction as if it was drunk, and fell towards a small hill 10 meters behind the green dragon. A bolt of silver lightning suddenly shot out from the bushes. The giant silver ape's knife-like claws replaced the golden dragon's attack and fiercely pierced into the green dragon's body. The silver ape's claws were unbelievably sharp, and half of his arms sank into the green dragon's body. Oh, this attack clearly caused immense pain to the green dragon. His 20-meter-long body started twisting madly, and the trees in the surrounding 10-meter-wide area all snapped under his twisting. The giant silver ape, whose claws had sunk into the green dragon's body, also started rolling with him under the green dragon's control. However, the giant silver ape's tenacity was astonishing. After it reacted, it immediately pulled out its claws and leaped into the air like a bolt of silver lightning. It actually shot straight towards the green dragon's eyes, attempting to first blind the green dragon and slowly torment it. Whoosh! A silver dragon spear suddenly pierced out and struck the giant silver ape's chest. The giant silver ape's momentum was blocked by the dragon spear as it madly charged at the green dragon. The enraged giant silver ape let out a piercing howl and waved its sharp claws. The dragon spear immediately broke into 2 pieces, leaving only the tip of the spear in the giant silver ape's chest. Damned beast, you want to take advantage of me too? Celt casually tossed away the broken dragon spear and slowly pulled out a strange longsword. As soon as the long sword appeared, a swift and fierce aura suddenly rippled out from the long sword. Circles of starlight began to spread out from the long sword. Celt pointed the long sword at the giant silver ape. The silver fighting aura and the starlight on the long sword converged together and shot towards the giant silver ape with an incomparably surging momentum. Han Shua, who was hiding in the shadows, immediately sensed a boundless aura of the stars when he saw the longsword raised in Celt's hand. Greatly astonished, Han Shua immediately confirmed that this longsword was no ordinary item. Otherwise, it wouldn't possess such a vast and strange aura. The ferocious giant silver ape also felt the vast aura of the starry sky, especially when the starlight gathered by the silver dochi shot down. It was like a miniature galaxy map, deep and mysterious, but full of unknown terror and danger. However, the green dragon was on the verge of death after being repeatedly injured. As long as the giant silver ape approached and struck again, the green dragon would definitely die. In that case, the green dragon's magical core would be easily obtained. The giant silver ape's bloodshot eyes sparkled when it saw the starry silver fighting aura gradually approaching. It seemed to be hesitating whether to take the risk or not. Suddenly, the giant silver ape's fierce eyes lit up. It abruptly shot out like a bolt of lightning, bypassing the starry fighting aura shooting towards it in an attempt to kill Celt and the green dragon together and seize the green dragon's magical core. How could it be so easy to dodge? Celt sneered. He twisted the longsword in his hand, causing the starry fighting aura to suddenly change direction and shoot towards the giant silver ape's back with boundless speed. A mournful howl sounded from the giant silver ape's mouth. A dozen bleeding holes appeared on the giant silver ape's back after being hit by the starry fighting aura. Each hole was dripping with blood. Greedy beast, how does the divine weapon, Starry Sky, taste? Do you want to try it again? Celt stood in front of the green dragon, chuckling as he looked at the giant silver ape in ridicule. Divine weapon, Starry Sky. Han Shua, who was hiding in the shadows, was horrified. He had originally planned to immediately seize the opportunity to attack, but once again stopped. Seeing the Sky Knight actually injure the tyrannical giant silver ape with the divine weapon Starry Sky, he understood that Celt had completely relied on the effects of the divine weapon. The giant silver ape's blood-red eyes stared fixedly at the divine weapon Starry Sky in Celt's hands, feeling the vast waves of star power emanating from it. Gradually, fear appeared in the giant silver ape's eyes. It let out 2 low growls and slowly retreated. He'd been hit by Celt's divine weapon, Starry Sky. Although the highly intelligent silver ape had thought of dodging, he didn't dare to turn his bleeding back towards Celt. Despicable human, I will tear you to pieces. At this moment, the golden dragon's enormous roar approached once again. The golden dragon also fell and transformed into the image of a middle-aged man, his face twisted as he charged towards Celt. The golden dragon seemed to know that his large body didn't have any advantage against Celt, and would instead give Celt a bigger target to attack. Thus, he transformed into his human form to attack. With a roar, a beam of golden light shot towards Celt. The giant silver ape, who had been planning to dodge, turned into a bolt of lightning and shot towards the green dragon when it saw the enraged golden dragon entangling Kelt. However, before it could even reach the green dragon, a mournful scream suddenly sounded from the green dragon's mouth. When it landed in front of the green dragon, it discovered that there was a large hole in the green dragon's head. A person shrouded in black demonic light was collecting the green dragon's magical core, eyes, and dragon horn. Haha, sorry, everything of the green dragon is mine. I advise you to get out of the way. Han Shuo laughed heartily as he collected the spoils of war while hefting the demon's lair edge that glowed with bloody light. The giant silver ape was about to recklessly approach when it suddenly felt a boundless murderous aura emanating from the demon's lair edge. It seemed to be filled with the cries of tens of thousands of vengeful spirits, ready to drown out anyone who approached at any time. The giant silver ape, who had a dozen bloody holes in its back by the divine weapon, Starry Sky, now had an instinctive fear of some peculiar weapons. The boundless aura of ferocity emanating from the demon's lair edge was not as peaceful and natural as the divine weapon, Starry Sky, but instead possessed a boundless aura of slaughter and violence. This aura was much more of a threat to the giant silver ape than the divine weapon, Starry Sky. Therefore, the giant silver ape could only watch as Han Shuo took away all the good things from the green dragon's body. It hesitated, not daring to take a single step forward. Uraka! Kelt, who had been entangled by the golden dragon, suddenly let out a sharp howl when he heard the green dragon's miserable howl. His voice was filled with grief and indignation. It seemed that Kelt and the green dragon had a very deep relationship. The green dragon's tragic death had greatly affected him. There was no room for distraction in battle. Kelt's howl had given the golden dragon an opportunity. The golden dragon's fist landed and directly flattened Kelt's sturdy armor. 2 streaks of blood hung from the corners of Kelt's mouth as he retreated in panic. He looked coldly at Han Shuo, who was standing on the green dragon's head, and said in a low voice, "No matter who you are, I will make you wish you were dead." Kelt let out another howl of grief and indignation as soon as he finished speaking. He turned around and fled into the distance. Even with the divine weapon, Starry Sky, in hand, Kelt, who had made enemies on 3 sides, knew that it would be extremely difficult to gain an advantage. Han Shuo, whose true appearance couldn't be seen, was an enemy whose strength couldn't be predicted. Therefore, Kelt had no choice but to immediately flee even if he didn't want to. If you don't pull up the roots when you cut the grass, it will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Since that's the case, then don't blame me for being ruthless. After stripping off all the good stuff from the green dragon's body, Han Shuo muttered to himself in a low voice. He then said to the drooling giant silver ape beside him, "The rest of the green dragon's things are yours." A beam of black light suddenly shot up into the sky and chased after Kelt along with the golden dragon. They intended to eliminate the slightly injured Kelt so as to avoid endless troubles. After Han Shuo left, the giant silver ape let out a low roar and immediately pounced on the green dragon's corpse. It began to devour the green dragon's brain matter and dragon tendons. Although these things weren't as nutritious as the core of a magical beast, they were still able to increase the giant silver ape's strength. Kelt didn't fly in Castle's direction as he fled. He hadn't expected that there would be so many experts hiding in the dark forest. He'd originally been able to travel unhindered with just him and the green dragon, but now he'd ended up with the green dragon dead and himself injured. For the proud and arrogant commander of the Redbud Knights, this was an unacceptable reality. Kelt, who'd roamed the continent for many years and rarely encountered defeat, was truly enraged this time. As he fled, the image of the figure blocking the black light was deeply imprinted in his mind. He was already thinking of how to use the Redbud Knights to capture the person who'd killed Uraka and tear him to pieces. Despicable human, fight me to the death. The golden dragon's thunderous roars continuously rang out. The golden dragon was determined to kill Kelt, but unfortunately, his body couldn't withstand the repeated blows. Not only were his roars much weaker, but his speed had also slowed due to the excessive blood loss. His head was also starting to feel dizzy. If he wasn't a golden dragon, he would have long since collapsed from such heavy injuries. The fact that this golden dragon had been able to hold on until now was truly worthy of the title of the dragon race's strongest physical body. Reptile, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Celt, who'd fled for some distance, finally couldn't help but stop when he saw that the golden dragon was growing weaker and weaker. The divine tool, Starry Sky, in his hand once again shot out a resplendent galaxy diagram. Under the stimulation of the silver Do-Chi, specks of light were like stars shining with a beautiful luster. The vast and boundless aura of the starry sky slowly filled the air, enveloping the golden dragon that was relentlessly chasing after him. The golden dragon had suddenly attacked Celt, not giving him the opportunity to use the divine weapon, Starry Sky. Celt had only been able to take advantage of the distraction to attack him. Now that Celt's divine weapon, Starry Sky, had been fully utilized, the golden dragon suddenly woke up as soon as the galaxy map was unfurled. However, it was too late to dodge now. The golden dragon was flying at high speed, but it was difficult to stop even if he wanted to. He could only force himself to change direction in an attempt to escape the range of the Starry Sky Do-Chi. At this moment, a sharp whistle suddenly rang out. A black light wriggled forward like a venomous snake, suddenly arriving a dozen meters away from Celt's chest. Celt, who'd been prepared to watch the golden dragon's injuries with cold eyes, hastily retracted his Starry Sky Do-Chi when he saw the black light rapidly approaching. The Starry Sky Do-Chi that had been shooting towards the golden dragon once again magically turned around and shot towards the black light that had suddenly appeared. This was the tacit rule of the super-rank magical beasts and the humans. The golden dragon's body was at its weakest now. He didn't have a space magic scroll to save his life. He'd long since seen Han Shua's ruthlessness. He naturally believed that Han Shua would treat him as prey and eliminate him. That was why he'd said those words. Celt's loss of an ear won't affect his strength. He's only injured because he's completely exhausted his fighting aura. When we fought just now, not only did he recognize my weapon, but he also sensed the aura on my body. I can sense that Celt has already met up with the Redbud Knights. Now that we have a common enemy, I don't think it's a good idea to kill you. Han Shua slowly walked out from the shade of the tree, calmly looking at the golden dragon as he spoke. When he saw that the golden dragon's expression had calmed down, Han Shua continued, "In addition, I think that you are a golden dragon worthy of making friends with. I admire your courage and perseverance very much. I think that having a friend like you is more valuable than the magical cores on your body. Thank you. You've won the respect and friendship of the golden dragon Sidric." The golden dragon Sidric expressed the greatest respect to Han Shua in dragon etiquette. "Sidric, I think that the most important thing for you to do right now is to recover from your injuries. This despicable knight named Celt will certainly not let us off after meeting up with the Redbud Knights. However, the Dark Forest is incomparably vast. It shouldn't be a problem for the two of us to avoid them. On the other hand, their large group will make it easy to find them. Once you've recovered, we can join forces to deal with him." The golden dragon's voice was trembling even now. When Han Shua saw that he could collapse at any moment, he thought for a moment and proposed to the golden dragon Sidric. "I will return to my tribe. Once my injuries are better, I will lead the warriors of my tribe to kill all of these despicable ambushers who dared to offend me." The golden dragon made a solemn vow, and then respectfully said to Han Shua, "There is a dragon valley in the deepest part of the dark forest. In the future, no matter if it is you or your descendants, whenever you need me, Sidric, you can go to the dragon valley to find me. I'm sorry, I really can't hold on any longer. I'll be leaving first." Afraid that Han Shua would go back on his words at any time, Sidric forced a friendly smile at Han Shua after he finished speaking. He once again transformed into his dragon form and flew unsteadily towards the depths of the dark forest. It seemed that his injuries weren't light and that he wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. Once a dragon reached adulthood, they would usually leave the Dragon Valley and occupy a mountain or river for themselves, accumulating their wealth in the long path of evolution. Some dragons preferred to live alone while others preferred to live in groups. Han Shuo knew a little about the Dragon Valley in the Dark Forest from the Dark Mantle's intelligence, but he had never explored it. This golden dragon Sidric had actually come from the Dragon Valley. It seemed that his background wasn't small. Han Shuo had originally planned to use Sidric's strength to deal with Kelt, but hadn't thought that he'd come out in the form of Dragon Tanai. Han Shuo thought that if Kelt couldn't leave the Dark Forest in a short period of time and Sidric returned alive, then the Redbud Knights, one of the top 10 Knight Orders on the continent, would disappear forever once the dragons of the Dragon Valley found him. Now that Kelt was seriously injured and Fire Grand Magus Marceau had disappeared, the raid on the underground world would likely have to be delayed. When Han Shuo found the Redbud Knights by following the tracks, he discovered that they had stopped in their tracks and were frantically gathering in the central tent to treat Kelt. The central tent was surrounded by layers of knights, and several powerful mages had set up layers upon layers of magical boundaries around it. Han Shuo hid in the shadows and carefully observed for a while. He discovered that it was impossible to assassinate Kelt at this time. Even the ground where Kelt was standing was as hard as iron under the effects of the magical boundaries. When the Earth Elite zombie failed to break through the boundary, Han Shuo immediately dispelled the idea. Seeing that the Redbud Knights had set up camp, seemingly intending to first stabilize Kelt's injuries, Han Shuo understood that their raid on the underground world wouldn't happen in the near future. After observing for a while, Han Shuo saw the Druid trader Castle return empty-handed after an hour. Castle's face was full of misfortune. It was obvious that he hadn't caught Cecilia, Emily, and the others. Only then did Han Shuo truly relax. He didn't continue to linger here, flying in the direction of the Cemetery of Death in the Dark Forest. After resting for a night in the Cemetery of Death, Han Shuo once again returned to the City Lord's mansion in Bretel City the next day using the teleportation array. Walking out of the secret underground chamber of the City Lord's mansion, Han Shuo sighed with emotion at the mysteries of magic. Just yesterday, he'd been risking his life in the Dark Forest thousands of miles away, using the teleportation array. Now, he'd appeared here, teleporting thousands of miles in an instant. Even the technologically advanced Earth couldn't do this, but this profound continent that utilized magic and martial arts had miraculously done it. After leaving Bretel City for 2 days, Han Shuo suddenly remembered that Helentina had been imprisoned in the prison cell. He suddenly remembered that she hadn't eaten for 2 days. The secret prison cell in the City Lord's mansion had never been used to imprison anyone. After Han Shuo had bound Helentina and thrown her in, he hadn't notified anyone. Therefore, no one would bring her food. Suddenly remembering, Han Shuo hurried to the prison cell and opened it. He discovered that Helentina's face was pale and haggard. Her stomach was shriveled up, making a constant rumbling sound, as if there was a little bird chirping continuously. Sure enough, Helentina had been starving for the past 2 days. If Han Shuo had returned a little later, perhaps such a charming beauty would have starved to death. Don't listen to the nonsense of those talkative servants. I only starved that woman for 2 days, don't get the wrong idea. The 3 perverts did not believe him at all. However, as subordinates, they naturally understood that their superior needed to maintain some semblance of dignity. Therefore, they all nodded and sincerely admitted their mistake, saying that the Lord was naturally not that kind of person. However, their eyes were filled with envy. It was obvious that they did not believe Han Shuo's explanation. This woman is the Grand Duke of the Helen Duchy, Helentina. Has anyone come to negotiate with you in the past 2 days? When Han Shuo saw that the 3 didn't believe him, he couldn't help but reveal Helentina's identity. He thought to himself, do you all believe me now? What? My lord, you're actually dealing with Grand Duke Helen of the Helen Duchy. Chester blurted out without even thinking. Falk and Dick's expressions changed. Dick was even more serious as he shouted, my lord, we're in big trouble this time. I think Bretel City will face the crazy retaliation of the 2 Grand Duchies. Once the news that the venomous beauty Helentina is in my lord's hands spreads out, I reckon that many people from the 7 Grand Duchies will be full of interest in Bretel City again. We'll deal with it when it comes, what's there to be afraid of? If the 7 grand duchies dare to come, we'll let them have a taste of the magic crystal cannons. 6 magic crystal cannons will be erected on the city walls. If any of the duchies wants to invade Bretel City again, they'll have to pay the price in blood. Falk was obviously a war maniac as he coldly snorted. After pausing for a moment, Falk suddenly thought of something. His expression changed slightly as he said to Han Shua, however, if the 7 grand duchies continue to attack, the magic crystal mines we have will be far from enough to replenish the magic crystal cannons. Once the magic crystal cannons are no longer operational, Bretel City's current defenses won't be able to resist the attacks of the 7 grand duchies. Magic crystal mines were naturally formed ores that could be made into all kinds of magic equipment. Some transportation matrices and magic weapons required magic crystal mines. Magic crystal mines were different from the cores of magical beasts. The energy within magic crystal mines couldn't be directly absorbed by humans or beasts, and could only be used with equipment. Most of the energy within the cores of magical beasts could be directly absorbed by magical beasts. An extremely small portion of the energy could also be absorbed by humans with suitable attributes. Therefore, magical beast cores were even more precious than magic crystal mines. However, although magical beast cores were more precious, most of them couldn't be used as the power source for magic matrices, nor could they be used on magic crystal cannons. If the magic crystal cannons were to be operated, they still needed magic crystal mines. It looks like we really need to have designs on the underground world's magic crystal mines. Han Shua muttered to himself in a low voice as he quickly thought about the different uses of magic crystal mines and magical beast cores. My lord's boldness is indeed impressive. He clearly knew that she was Helentina, yet he still dared to capture her and ravage her for 2 days. This kind of boldness that doesn't fear any potential threats is truly admirable. Dick sighed with heartfelt admiration. The 3 perverts seemed to firmly believe that Han Shua had done something to Helentina. No matter how Han Shua tried to explain, they wouldn't believe him. Han Shua was too lazy to say anything more in the end. He instructed Falk, use all the gold coins I brought to Bretel City's defenses. I'll have the people of Helen Duchy take out 1,000,000 gold coins to redeem Helentina. If anyone from Helen Duchy comes, report to me. After saying this, Han Shua no longer listened to the 3 perverts' flattery. He directly returned to his room in the city lord's mansion and waited for the 2 maids to bring Helentina over. Half an hour later, the 2 maids slowly brought a weak-looking Helentina into Han Shua's room. Helentina, whose mental strength had been imprisoned and who had been starved for so long, felt weak all over. Right now, she probably couldn't even beat a maid, so it was impossible for her to escape from the city lord's mansion. She also gave up on that thought and obediently walked over under the guidance of the 2 maids. Helentina's face was a bit rosier after eating and drinking some water. She didn't need the support of the 2 maids to walk in. Her bright eyes glared hatefully at Han Shua. She cursed in a sweet voice as soon as she entered, "Crude and despicable necromancer, how dare you treat me like this? Although you're a sinister and evil necromancer, you should know that abusing prisoners will cause you to be despised by everyone." The 2 maids looked at each other and fearfully raised their heads to look at Han Shua. One of them asked in a low voice, "My lord, if you don't have any other orders, we'll be taking our leave." The 2 maids looked at each other and fearfully raised their heads to look at Han Shua. One of them asked in a low voice, "My lord, if you don't have any other orders, we'll be taking our leave." The 2 maids were so scared that their knees went soft. They trembled as they nodded in agreement, not daring to raise their heads. After a while, the 2 maids saw that Han Shua didn't have any intentions of punishing them, so they left the place in trepidation. The 2 maids were so scared that their knees went soft. They trembled as they nodded in agreement, not daring to raise their heads. After a while, the 2 maids saw that Han Shua didn't have any intentions of punishing them, so they left the place in trepidation. This time, the 2 who left didn't dare say another word. It looked like Han Shua's deterrence had taken effect. After the 2 maids left, Han Shua opened his mouth to speak to Helentina, who was glaring angrily at him. "I'm sorry, it was because of my negligence that you went hungry for 2 days. However, I really didn't do it on purpose. I was just careless and forgot. Handing over Helentina's space ring, Han Shuo continued, "Alright, I'll return your space ring to you. I don't think this kind of situation will happen again." Helentina's beautiful eyes glared hatefully at Han Shuo. She took the space ring and put it on, but she still couldn't calm her anger. However, she clearly understood that as a prisoner, she didn't have much capital to brag about. After glaring at Han Shuo for a while, Helentina sighed softly and said in a somewhat weak tone, "If you want to use me to threaten Helen Duchy, I think you won't get what you want. For days have passed, and there shouldn't be anyone from Helen Duchy coming over with 1,000,000 gold coins to redeem me. How about this? I still have 400,000 gold coins in my space ring. If you agree to let me go back to Helen Duchy, I'll give you these gold coins. How about it?" Sitting on a chair, Han Shuo rubbed his chin as he looked at Helentina with sparkling eyes. After pondering for a while, he opened his mouth and said, "No hurry, I'll wait a bit longer and see. If it really is as you say, then I'll discuss the conditions with you. No, if I can't return to Helen Duchy in a short time, then Helen Duchy will certainly sink into internal strife. If this drags on for too long, then returning to Helen Duchy will be useless." Helentina immediately said anxiously, "This has nothing to do with me. As a Grand Duke of Helen Duchy, you're definitely worth 1,000,000 gold coins." "Heh, 400,000 gold coins is really too little. If I let you go so easily, then wouldn't I suffer a great loss? I don't care if your Helen Duchy will fall into internal strife or if your people will be littered with corpses. In any case, don't even think about leaving my place without 1,000,000 gold coins." Han Shuo crossed his legs and leisurely looked at the extremely anxious Helentina as he spoke with a smile that was neither fast nor slow. "You devil from hell, plus 6 magic crystal cannons, that's enough for 1,000,000 gold coins. Don't tell me that your greed has no end." Helentina's charming face was flushed red from anger. Her body swayed as if she was on the verge of fainting. "The longer this drags on, the worse it will be for you. It seems that you really don't have that many gold coins on you. I'm not an unreasonable person. How about this, you write me an IOU. After you return to Helen Duchy, you have to return the remaining 600,000 gold coins to me within 3 months. Han Shuo narrowed his eyes as he looked at Helentina. He waited for her to vent her anger before opening his mouth again. "Greedy glutton, you will receive retribution." Helentina was still angrily making a ruckus. "Alright then, you can continue making a ruckus here. Just wait for Helen Duchy to fall into chaos. I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't keep you company." Han Shuo stood up calmly and leisurely walked out the door without even looking at Helentina, who was making a ruckus. "Devil, greedy devil, I promise you, I promise you." When Han Shuo was about to walk out of the door, Helentina, who'd been yelling loudly, finally gave in and screamed hysterically. "Wouldn't it have been better if you had promised earlier? Your body is so weak, making such a ruckus isn't good for your health." Han Shuo laughed heartily and casually took out a contract. He made Helentina press her fingerprint and sign her name, and finally branded her with a magic imprint before stopping. Chapter 325. The sunset glow was as red as the burning clouds. A cool breeze blew gently, making people feel relaxed and happy. Bretel City had been repaired during this period of time. All the holes and scars had been repaired. The 2 tall magic crystal cannons at the city gates flickered with a faint red light under the sunset glow, as if they could spit out huge tongues of flame at any time. Helentina, who'd been forced by Han Shuo to sign a contract, looked at the 2 magic crystal cannons that should have belonged to her at the city gates. She felt very upset. Han Shuo was all smiles as he stood on the city walls. Holding the contract, he waved goodbye and said, "Honorable Duke Helen, we won't be escorting you." Helentina cursed all 18 generations of Han Shuo's ancestors in her heart. She was worried that Helen Duchy might rebel at any time. Her mental strength recovered, and she slowly used a levitation spell to fly into the sky. Her bright eyes glared fiercely at Han Shuo for a while, then she gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Greedy demon, I will definitely come back for revenge. Have a safe trip. Remember to pay me back the gold coins you owe me within 3 months." Han Shuo smiled wholeheartedly as he shook the contract in his hand, as if reminding Helentina not to renege on her debt. Humph. Helentina angrily turned her head and slowly flew in the direction of Helen Duchy like a fiery shadow. Under the illumination of the sunset glow, this fiery shadow was like a rainbow cutting through the sky. My lord is really too evil. Not only did he take possession of this poisonous beauty, he even extorted a large amount of gold coins. He really eats people up without spitting out the bones. Chester shook his head and sighed. His gaze towards Han Shuo was full of worship. I didn't think that this Helentina would be so beautiful. No wonder Benedict of Narsen Duchy is so infatuated with her. What a pity, what a pity. He definitely didn't think that my lord would be one step ahead of him and pluck this flower. Dick laughed mischievously, taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. He maliciously speculated about Benedict's ugly expression when he found out about this. Lord Castellan, I believe that with Helentina's viciousness, she won't be satisfied after she leaves. As long as she releases the news that our Bretel city has 400,000 gold coins, I think the 7 grand duchies will definitely have greedy hearts. Falk, who was leaning against Han Shuo, said worriedly to Han Shuo after Helentina left. Han Shuo frowned and pondered for a while as he looked at the rosy sky. He then looked at the blurry shadows of the mountains surrounding Bretel city. He said to Dick in the distance, "Dick, send some people to the surrounding mountains and invite the mountain chiefs to Bretel city. Tell them that I'm treating them to a meal." My lord, the previous city lords of Bretel city were all mediocre and incompetent people, never able to help them resist the bandits. Therefore, they have never had a good impression of Bretel city's city lords. Naturally, there's no reverence for them. I can pass the news to them, but I'm afraid that they'll look down on us and refuse to attend the banquet. Dick had an awkward expression on his face, hesitating for a moment before explaining to Han Shuo. That was then and this is now. Fulkin of Mount Tali will definitely come. If he passes the news to the others before coming, I believe that the chiefs of the other mountains who know of our strength will also be willing to come down. The past is the past, the present is the present. All of Bretel city is my territory, and they are all my subjects. If these people really don't know what's good for them, I'll let them know how to respect a city lord. Han Shuo said unhurriedly to Dick. Dick nodded and replied, "All right, I'll definitely inform them." Dick was also a mountain person. He'd been in contact with the mountain people in the surrounding mountains before Han Shuo had come to Bretel city. He'd secretly maintained a good relationship with them. Dick originally didn't hold any hope for Han Shuo, but now that he'd witnessed Han Shuo's strength and methods, he understood that if his unruly compatriots provoked Han Shuo, they wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Therefore, as soon as Han Shuo's words fell, Dick made up his mind to persuade his unruly compatriots to come. He didn't want them to die under Han Shuo's undead army. After Dick left, Han Shuo said to Falk, "Use the gold coins in our hands and do everything in our power to arm the entire Bretel city. I've already commissioned some trading companies to transport war chariots, catapults, kerosene, goblin missiles, and other firepower equipment. All you need to do is have the masons tamp down any weak spots on the city walls and increase the height of the city walls that aren't high enough. City Lord, the craftsmen are already working overtime to complete these tasks. What we currently lack the most are manpower and soldiers with combat strength. Bretel city has experienced the poison of war and the total number of citizens in the city is only about 50,000. Compared to some large cities with millions of citizens, the population is pitifully small. We've been recruiting soldiers recently, but we've only recruited 200 or so soldiers despite such a great temptation. The number of people is far from enough. With such a large Bretel city, it's basically impossible to rely on the 3,000 soldiers in the city to defend the 4 city gates. Even if we have powerful firepower, we still need people to operate it. If we can't solve the population problem, I think Bretel City will always be this lifeless. Falk was indeed worthy of being a knight who had experienced the fires of war. He could see what Bretel City lacked the most with a single glance. This was also the biggest weakness of Bretel City. This was indeed a difficult problem. Han Shua also understood that what Bretel City lacked the most right now was manpower. However, he didn't have a good way to solve this problem. Bretel City had always been in the flames of war. After so many years, some of the residents who had come out of Bretel City had already compared it to hell on earth. Not only the original residents, but also the civilians from other cities who knew of Bretel City would probably not be willing to move to Bretel City. What Han Shua could do now was to first ensure the safety of Bretel City, and then start from all aspects. Through good policies, safety conditions, and benefits that would be beneficial to their development, he would slowly attract residents from other cities to settle in Bretel City. However, this wasn't a process that could be accomplished overnight. It would indeed require a period of transition. Looking into Han Shua's eyes, Dick felt as if Han Shua knew everything he was thinking. He couldn't help but feel a bit apprehensive. Chapter 326. The continuous sound of horse hooves rapidly approached from afar. Han Shua had been inspecting the progress of the construction on the city walls when he saw Falk, the leader of the knights, rush over anxiously. Falk quickly dismounted and jogged to the wall in front of Han Shua. He raised his head to look at Han Shua, panting heavily. "City Lord, the caravan transporting chariots and other equipment from Sea Mist City has been robbed by several groups of bandits. The bandits have said that they will only release the people and the chariots and other equipment if they pay 50,000 gold coins." The bandits roaming the way from Sea Mist City to Bretel City weren't large in scale. When Han Shua had ordered these equipment from the merchant guilds through Phoebe, not only had he warned them to be careful of the bandits along the way, but he'd also had Falk send people to pick them up in advance. According to Han Shua's judgment, those small groups of bandits shouldn't have the guts to make a move. Now that he'd heard Falk's news, he asked with a gloomy face, "You're saying that several groups of bandits joined forces to make a move?" Falk's expression was a bit awkward as he nodded. "That's right. One group of bandits definitely wouldn't dare to make a move, but this time, 5 groups of bandits joined forces. The guards of the caravan simply couldn't hold them off. City Lord, those damned bandits are courting death. I'll immediately lead the knights in the city to eradicate all of them." "Wait!" Han Shua shouted, stopping Falk's impulsive actions. He thought for a moment before asking, "How many people know that we've purchased those chariots and equipment?" "The soldiers who picked us up on the way this time know." "What about it, my lord?" Falk was puzzled. He didn't understand why Han Shua would suddenly mention this matter. Snorting coldly, Han Shua said, "How could those bandits so coincidentally know that the caravan would arrive on that day? How could they suddenly join forces and extort gold coins from us after robbing the caravan? Don't you think this is a bit interesting?" Falk was shocked when he heard these words. He shouted, "My lord, are you saying that there might be a spy among our people?" "Not perhaps, there definitely is." Han Shua suddenly shouted, "I won't pursue your dereliction of duty for now. I'll give you half a day to find that spy and execute him. In addition, during the next recruitment, don't carelessly recruit people just because you're short on manpower. Kick out anyone with a dirty background." "Yes!" Falk loudly replied and leapt onto his horse. He rode his horse and galloped away with a cold expression. He was the one in charge of this matter. Now that such a big mistake had occurred, he couldn't escape responsibility no matter what. When Lawrence had sent him to Bretel City, he'd explained to him that Han Shua would be in charge of his life and death from now on. Having witnessed Han Shua's tyrannical strength, Falk understood that Han Shua wasn't a soft-hearted person. He cursed the traitor in his heart as he racked his brains for a way to quickly drag him out. An hour later, on the spacious marble plaza in front of the city lord's mansion, a total of 300 knights were lined up neatly under Falk's orders. All of them were tall and sturdy, clad in shining armor. Not to mention Fok's dereliction of duty this time, the military bearing and aura of these knights had been tempered through his training. They indeed had the demeanor of a grand knight regiment. This proved that Fok was indeed an outstanding knight officer. Han Shuo sat in the city lord's mansion, not caring about what methods Fok would use to find the spy. He was only thinking about how to eliminate the bandits and obstacles on the road from Seamist City to Bretel City as soon as possible. During this time, Han Shuo had placed all of his attention on the 7 grand duchies that could come back to plunder at any time. He'd actually neglected the large and small bandit groups along the way. There were more than a dozen bandit groups along the way, all of them small bandits with a few hundred or even a few dozen members. They weren't on the same level as the big bandit groups that roamed between Bretel City and the 7 grand duchies, easily numbering in the thousands. After experiencing Trota's death last time, Han Shuo had thought that these small bandits wouldn't dare act rashly, so he hadn't taken them to heart. He hadn't expected that these small bandits would stab him in the back at such a critical moment, robbing war equipment worth 100,000 gold coins. This made Han Shuo want to completely annihilate them. The road between Bretel City and Seamist City was the most important passage between Bretel City and the Lancelot Empire. If Bretel City wanted to develop, the importance of this road's safety was self-evident. If the immigrants were robbed on the road before they even reached Bretel City, no one would dare to settle down in Bretel City, no matter how extravagant Han Shuo's words were. They're the ones courting death, it's not that I'm not giving them a way out. Han Shuo said resolutely as he unconsciously drummed his fingers on the armrest of his chair. Fok hadn't let down Han Shuo's trust in him. He'd only spent 2 hours to ferret out the spy. Han Shuo hadn't seen who it was, but he'd heard waves of blood-curdling screams coming from outside the city lord's mansion. The blood-curdling screams that made one's scalp numb continued for a while before abruptly stopping. 5 minutes later, Fok walked in with reverence in his heart and bowed respectfully in front of Han Shuo. Fok said in a low voice, "Lord Count, I have failed in my duties." Slightly straightening his lazy posture, Han Shuo shot a cold glance at Fok and asked, "Have you interrogated them?" Nodding his head, Fok replied, "A total of 3 soldiers who joined not long ago. They were all mixed in by the bandits nearby. Because I saw that they were strong, plus we were short on manpower at this time, I allowed them to join the knights without a thorough investigation. This is all my negligence. Lord Count, please punish me." Just as Fok had said, Bretel City was currently in need of manpower. Talents like Fok who could both lead and train soldiers were far too lacking. Fok's momentary carelessness was indeed a dereliction of duty, but Han Shuo didn't have anyone to replace him. Han Shuo was silent for a while, then snorted coldly, "I'll remember this for now. If you can atone for your crimes in the process of surrounding and annihilating those bandits, I'll forget about your negligence of duty this time." Fok nodded heavily and solemnly saluted, saying loudly, "Don't worry Lord Count, this kind of thing will never happen again. None of the bandits who participated in the robbery will be able to escape. As a knight, I guarantee you this." "Good, then gather 100 of your knights. We'll make a trip to the bandits' lair and see if these bandits have the qualifications to take the 50,000 gold coins in my hands." Han Shuo narrowed his eyes as he stood up. Fok could clearly feel the thick killing intent radiating from his body. He understood that these daring bandits would definitely pay a painful price this time. The night sky was as black as a canvas smeared with thick ink. This moonless night greatly hindered one's vision. Torches burned fiercely as they headed in a direction where the air was damp and weeds were growing. Dozens of huge wooden rafts were lined up in a long, willow leaf-shaped river. Many strong figures stood on the rafts, similarly holding torches in their hands. Noisy chatter could be heard coming from the people standing on the rafts. Fok rode on a warhorse with a torch in his hand, frowning as he looked at the bandits on the rafts in the distance. He cursed in a low voice, "Sly bandits, I didn't expect them to set this place as the transaction location. This is going to be a bit difficult." This area was quite a distance away from Bretel City. It wasn't at all between Seamist City and Bretel City, but rather in the middle of the road between Bretel City and the 7 grand duchies. Last time, Han Shuo had captured Helentina with 6 magic crystal cannons and returned to Bretel City from this river. However, because of the 6 heavy magic crystal cannons, it had taken him 2 days to return to Bretel City from here. This time, Han Shuo's party, which consisted purely of knights, only took half a day and arrived at the agreed location at night. It had to be said that the bandits had indeed chosen a good location this time. Once they took the 50,000 gold coins, they could quickly leave this place. Han Shuo's party, which consisted entirely of knights, would have no way of chasing them under the obstruction of the river. The location of the transaction had been announced by the bandits at the last minute. By the time Han Shuo's party knew it was this place, it was already too late to prepare. They'd unknowingly fallen into a passive position. This group of bandits isn't simple. They've arranged everything properly along the way and even tricked us. Once they take the gold coins, they can easily escape with the help of the rafts. The knights won't be able to chase after them at all. It looks like we've really encountered a group of troublesome bandits this time. Han Shuo said to Falk as he gazed at the bandits in front of him. My lord Count, what should we do? Even if my lord is a necromancer, those dark creatures won't be able to move freely in the water. Falk anxiously said to Han Shuo. He was prepared to atone for his crimes and had brought out all of his enthusiasm, intending to go all out in this transaction. There are actually a few light mages on the other side. It looks like these bandits had planned this long ago. These light mages should be here specifically to guard against me. Could it be that this matter isn't that simple? Is someone scheming against us in secret? Han Shuo's demon had just passed when he first saw 2 low-ranked light mages and spoke softly with surprise. One was a light journeyman mage and the other was an adept mage. Light mages of this level had limited use against high-ranked evil knights, but if a gargoyle that could fly approached them, even a mid to high-ranked holy light spell would be able to cause considerable damage to the gargoyle. Therefore, when Han Shuo saw the 2 light mages, he immediately became more vigilant. He waved his hand and said to Falk, "Stop for now. I'll take a look at the situation first. If this is a trap, we'll immediately retreat." By now, there was only one demon left out of the 3 that Han Shuo had refined. This made Han Shuo's observation speed slower than before, and he couldn't cover the entire area like before. In his heart, Han Shuo had already started to consider whether or not he should spend some time in seclusion to refine a higher-ranked mystical demon. A demon circled around the wooden raft on the river and really did discover the war equipment that Han Shuo had purchased. There were even Fabian and Jack of the Bust Merchant Guild among them. The 2 of them had been tied up tightly by the bandits, with 2 gleaming steel blades pressed against their necks. Fabian and Jack's expressions were shriveled, and it was obvious that they'd suffered quite a bit of shock. Apart from Fabian and Jack, there were also a dozen or so merchants from various merchant guilds, as well as 30 or so captured merchant guild guards. They were all tied up tightly, with bandits guarding them from all sides. The Bust Merchant Guild, which had won against Cameron in a grand gamble, had become one of the imperial merchant guilds. Cameron had been unable to recover from this setback, and had also lost the trust of many merchant guilds. On the contrary, the Bust Merchant Guild had taken advantage of the situation, gradually becoming active among the major merchant guilds. The war equipment that Han Shuo had purchased this time had been transported by the Bust Merchant Guild in conjunction with a few other merchant guilds. If they didn't get off to a good start, it would affect their impression of Bretel City, and it would be difficult to continue their cooperation in the future. Therefore, it wasn't just Fabian and Jack, the safety of the captured merchants and merchant guild guards was equally important. If they couldn't guarantee their safety, it would be difficult to make up for the losses in the future even if they killed all of these bandits. Han Shuo had a terrible headache as he looked at the bandits guarding the area closely. "Dorcas, what should we do next?" A burly man with a rough appearance and a height of 2 meters was obviously the leader of the bandits. He was currently on a wooden raft, facing a youth with a resolute expression and eyes that shone with the radiance of exuberant ambition. This youth was dressed like a small bandit. He was nearly 1.9 meters tall and stood ramrod straight, like a spear that would rather break than bend. The gaudy bandit attire couldn't conceal the light of ambition in his eyes at all. The youth called Dorcas glanced at the bandit leader and said confidently, "Don't worry, I've thought things through clearly. Not letting you kill these captives will give them some misgivings. Not to mention, we have the advantage of a wooden raft in this small river. The 2 light mages we hired with a large sum of money can block the gargoyles' attack. This matter is foolproof. I think they have no other way out than to pay." Dorcas, the commoner genius of the Imperial Military Academy. So it's him, no wonder. Chapter 327. The nature of the Lancelot Empire's military academy was different from that of the Babylon Academy. The Lancelot Empire's academy specialized in nurturing military talents that excelled in battle strategies. Mages, swordsmen, and knights weren't part of the academy's training scope. Just like all the other academies on the Profound Continent, the Imperial Military Academy would always be dominated by the noble academies. The reason why there were so many noble students was because the Imperial Military Academy's exorbitant tuition fees would cause commoners to shrink back. On the other hand, even if commoners truly entered the Imperial Military Academy, it would be difficult for them to systematically learn military knowledge from the truly powerful teachers. However, nothing was absolute. The Imperial Military Academy would occasionally produce 1 or 2 commoner students. Even under such unfavorable conditions, they would still be able to stand out. Their dazzling brilliance would even steal the limelight of the noble students. Normally, these kinds of people would be accepted into the Imperial Military Academy in a variety of ways. They would be able to successfully learn under the best teachers. As long as these outstanding commoner youths were obedient and docile, there would always be nobles or generals who recognized talent recommending them to their families or subordinates. Of course, there were also some commoner youths who were rebellious and didn't know how to conceal their dazzling brilliance. In the end, they would anger other noble students. In the worst-case scenario, they would be killed by those jealous nobles. In the best-case scenario, their careers would be obstructed and they would never have the chance to enter the army. Dorcas was one of these unlucky commoner geniuses. The young Dorcas had once been incomparably dazzling in the Imperial Military Academy. Unfortunately, because he was too rebellious and didn't know how to hide his brilliance, he fell in love with the Count's daughter and fell in love with her. This angered the Count's father and the girl's fiancé's family. The final result was that Dorcas was forcefully charged with a groundless crime. Not only was he expelled from the Imperial Military Academy, but he was also hunted down by 2 families and almost lost his life. He became a fugitive who couldn't see the light of day. This matter had happened a year ago. There was a description of it in the Dark Mantle's records. Back then, Han Shuo had used his authority in the Dark Mantle headquarters to look through the records and had a deep impression of it. He hadn't expected to meet this commoner military genius in such a place. Standing on the wooden raft, Dorcas' originally unruly face was now a bit gloomy because of his bitter experience. He stood ramrod straight as he gazed into the distance, turning his head to the bandit leader. "Leader, those people holding torches should be people from Bretel City. After taking these 50,000 gold coins, we need to go as far away as possible. It's best if we don't appear in the vicinity of Bretel City anymore. This city Lord Brian isn't someone easy to get along with. If we don't leave in time, not only will we have to cough up the 50,000 gold coins, but we'll also lose our lives. Don't worry. I won't foolishly stay behind to be surrounded and killed by someone who can destroy Redbeard Troda and the others. Let Laxi and the others suffer this person's wrath. 10,000 gold coins is enough for us to enjoy ourselves for a while." The bandit leader wasn't a fool either. He laughed rudely as he said this. He had been fooling around for a long time and was very satisfied with his share of 10,000 gold coins. Through the Een demon, Han Shuo had seen everything. He carefully observed the wooden raft Jack, Fabian, and the others were on. After a while, he said to Falk beside him, "Take out the cart with the 50,000 gold coins and give it to them. We can't let anything happen to those merchants." "Sir Count, are we just going to give in like this? We've thought of many ways to deal with this beforehand." Falk was eager to make a contribution. He couldn't help but feel suspicious when he heard that Han Shuo was going to hand over the money without any resistance. Dorcas, the top student of the Imperial Military Academy, is there. After careful consideration, we're already at a complete disadvantage in this transaction. It's also in the water, so we have no chance to make a move without harming the merchants. Let's give them the gold coins to redeem the war equipment and merchants. We'll deal with the bandits after we've secured the merchants and equipment. Before coming over, Han Shuo had planned on using the Earth Elite Zombie to launch a sudden attack. If they were in the forest, the Wood Elite Zombie would be able to protect the merchants for a short period of time. It was a pity that the crafty Dorcas had set the location of the transaction in the river. As the Water Elite Zombie hadn't been born yet, Han Shuo had no other way to complete the transaction in the water. Alright, I'll go right now. Falk didn't have any better ideas and only nodded in response. He rode forward on his warhorse, yelling, "Move the chests of gold coins to the riverside. We're going to start trading with those bandits." This time, Han Shuo had purposely loaded the box of gold coins instead of crystal cards. His original plan was to pour the gold coins into the group of bandits before the Wood Elite Zombie and Earth Elite Zombie made their move. The bandits in the alliance would definitely be suspicious and fight over the scattered gold coins on the ground first. This way, the Earth Elite Zombie and Wood Elite Zombie would be able to make a sudden move. Han Shuo's group, who were currently in a passive position, naturally had no way of reaping this kind of effect. When the sound of gold coins clattering rang out, the bandits on the other side drove their wooden rafts closer. The bandits at the back raised their bows and aimed at the knights on the shore, while the bandits at the front slowly pushed the merchants and chariots into the slightly submerged river. Dorcas was indeed sufficiently cautious. He didn't allow the wooden rafts to reach the shore from start to finish. The merchants and chariots all fell into the water before reaching the shore, not giving Han Shuo and the others any chance to make a move. When the box of gold coins was lifted onto the wooden rafts by two bandits who had entered the water, loud cheers came from the bandits' mouths. The arrogant bandits laughed heartily in excitement, and quite a few of the bandit leaders praised Dorcas of the Imperial Academy for his strength. Dorcas, who was in charge of the plan, didn't have any joy on his resolute face. He was gloomy and apathetic from start to finish. Amidst the bandits' cheers, there was even a trace of hesitation in his eyes. It was as if this supposedly perfect plan was a humiliating and helpless move. Amidst the excited clamor, the bandits took advantage of the fact that the wooden rafts were gradually moving further and further away. When the rafts were 50 meters away from Han Shuo and the others, the torches in their hands suddenly went out. The bandits stopped laughing crazily under the berating of their leaders. The moonless sky was pitch black, and the bandits had lost their voices and torches. Apart from Han Shuo, no one could clearly see their movements from 50 meters away. These bandits didn't cross the small river to the shore, but instead rode downstream along the river's flow. Dorcas shook his head at the bandits who were silently twisting their bodies in all sorts of strange postures to express the excitement in their hearts. He sighed softly in his heart. He didn't know if using these bandits for revenge was the right thing to do. However, he was now a fugitive. Unless he did something outrageous like betraying the Empire and defecting to another country, who would be able to help him take revenge? He was a native of the Lancelot Empire after all. No matter what, he couldn't become a traitor who would never be able to wash off the stain. Being a bandit was better than being a traitor to the Empire that everyone hated, right? Falk, immediately send them safely back to the city. This place is a bit far from the city, don't let anything happen to you. In the pitch-black night, Han Shuo's vision was similarly affected. As the wooden rafts gradually moved further and further away, Han Shuo was about to lose sight of the bandits. When the merchants and war equipment had all been brought ashore, Han Shuo hastily instructed Falk. "My Lord Count, are we not going to chase after those damned bandits?" Falk asked after staring blankly for a moment. "If you can safely send these things and the merchants back to the city, I can forget about your previous negligence. Remember, the outside of Bretel City isn't peaceful right now. You must be careful not to make any more mistakes." Han Shua cautiously warned Falk when he thought of the threat of the 7 Grand Duchies returning at any time, as well as the even larger bandit groups lingering between the 7 Grand Duchies and Bretel City. Falk's main goal this time was to atone for his crimes by meritorious deeds. It was precisely because he kept this thought in mind that he'd lost his usual calm during the operation. Now that he heard Han Shua's cautious warning, he suddenly realized that his mind was about to be completely occupied by his obsession. He immediately jumped in fright and calmly said, "My lord, please be at ease, I will safely send them back to the city." Seeing that Falk's eyes had regained clarity, Han Shua knew that Falk had walked out of the urgent need to atone for his crimes. Only then did he relax and pat Falk's shoulder, saying in a gratified tone, "Be careful." As soon as he finished speaking, Han Shua floated away like a gust of wind. Han Shua's figure disappeared in a flash in the dark night. Falk and the others had no idea what Han Shua wanted to do. "You guys use your horses to tow the carts. You guys come down and give the horses to the merchants. Hurry, take advantage of the darkness to return to the city. Keep your eyes open along the way. Everyone will be in trouble if there's even the slightest mistake." Falk loudly commanded after Han Shua left. The knights that Falk had brought with him quickly arranged for the merchants to tie up the chariots and other equipment according to his orders, gradually returning to Bretel City. The cool night breeze blew gently. Half an hour after the wooden rafts on the river were far away from Falk's knights, the torches were once again lit. Even the leader that Dorcas was following laughed heartily without a care in the world. He didn't take Dorcas's promise seriously at all. "Aha, we've arrived. We'll reach Narsen Duchy's Tulian town after a short walk ashore. The girls from Spring Full Garden must be waiting for us there." Laxi laughed excitedly and instructed his subordinates beside him, "Hurry up and stop the rafts. Boss will take you to have some fun." Dorcas had an ugly expression on his face. He resented these untrustworthy bandits, but he knew that his strength was limited. Although he was furious, there was nothing he could do. He could only look on helplessly as all the bandits disembarked from the rafts one by one and happily made their way to Spring Garden in Tulian town. "Fellow bandit friends who took my 50,000 gold coins, I've been waiting for you for a long time." Suddenly, a young man's laughter rang out in the darkness. Under the illumination of the bandits' torches, an extremely tall figure gradually appeared in front of them, blocking their path. Chapter 328. A sneer slowly fell, and an extremely tall figure gradually appeared under the illumination of the torch. It was a handsome young man with an evil smile on his face. The young man was more than 1.9 meters tall, and he stood there like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, giving people a strong sense of impact. Dressed in a well-fitting green warrior suit, his refined and strong physique showed off his sharpness. The corner of his mouth curled up into a faint smile with a hint of playfulness. He was like a goshawk soaring in the sky, planning to tease the fleeing wild rabbits on the ground, appearing confident and calm. After the youth's figure appeared, the frightened bandits hurriedly looked around, as if they thought that the youth had more reinforcements behind him, so they were somewhat nervous and apprehensive. "There's no need to look, it's just me," Han Shua explained with a light smile. He didn't look at the bandit leader, who had clearly let out a sigh of relief. Instead, he focused his gaze on Dorcas, who was standing ramrod straight in the middle of the crowd, and asked, "Do you think that these bandits who only know how to enjoy themselves and do nothing can help you take revenge?" Dorcas' expression was indifferent. After a moment of silence, he looked at Han Shua and said, "This has nothing to do with you. You're here for the 50,000 gold coins, right?" Han Shua smiled and shook his head. His eyes were fixed on Dorcas, and he casually said, "No, although 50,000 gold coins is a large sum of money in the eyes of these bandits, it's nothing to me. I've been following you all this time, not for the 50,000 gold coins, but for you, Dorcas." Dorcas' expression changed greatly, and he glared hatefully at Han Shua, as if he wanted to firmly imprint Han Shua's appearance in his heart. He then laughed bitterly, "I didn't think that after so long, those two families would still have the thought of killing me. I just didn't think that I'd be so valuable already, huh? Cut the crap. You're just one person, and you dare block our way. You're courting death. The bandit leader Laxi, who had been impatient to go to the full spring garden to enjoy, finally couldn't hold back his impatience after confirming that Han Shua was indeed alone. As Laxi shouted, the other bandit leaders also agreed. It seemed that they could no longer endure the lust in their hearts. Under the orders of the bandit leaders, the equally anxious bandit minions quickly surrounded Han Shua with weapons that were not worth a single gold coin in their hands. From start to finish, Han Shua had a faint smile on his face. He was completely unmoved by the actions of these bandits who were eager for the girl's smooth skin. He continued to look at Dorcas and shake his head. Only when Dorcas had a puzzled expression did he open his mouth to explain, to others, you're not only worthless, but a hot potato. But to me, you're worth far more than 50,000 gold coins. I'll talk to you about this later. After I've dealt with these bandits, we'll slowly discuss the issue of your value. Arrogant fellow, you're courting death. Laxi looked angrily at Han Shua and waved his hand, yelling, kill him, he's definitely that evil necromancer. You guys are so close to him, don't give him the chance to chant his magic. Aha, he's the new city lord of Bretel City. Look at the space ring on his hand, he must be a big fat sheep. Brothers, let's rob the space ring from me. I can already imagine the wealth inside. Bandit leader Tuka yelled in excitement. He raised the wide double-edged battle axe in his hands and stared greedily at the space ring on Han Shua's finger. Thump, thump thump, just as the bandit minions were licking their lips and preparing to tear Han Shua to pieces, heavy footsteps suddenly sounded. What's that sound? Laxi's messy eyebrows furrowed into two irregular triangles. He looked all around him before asking loudly. The bandit minions who were about to make a move stopped in shock when they heard Laxi's shout. They looked around in confusion, not knowing what was going on. Thump, thump thump, thump thump thump, the heavy footsteps were getting closer and closer. A few sparse branches and leaves on the side swayed lightly, reminding these lowly bandits that the ground was trembling. But the moonless night was pitch black, and even with torches, the distance they could illuminate was limited. Therefore, the bandits who were looking around could only hear footsteps getting louder and louder, but could not see what was gradually approaching. It's the sound of the iron hooves of the fire-breathing war beasts under the evil night. Everyone, don't look around, you're all done for. Han Shua, who was surrounded by bandits, suddenly explained with a smile. Damn it, he's already summoned his undead creatures. Kill him immediately. As long as he's dead, the undead creatures won't be much of a threat without his command. The light adept mage hired by the bandits turned pale with fright and hastily yelled. When the panicked bandit leaders heard the light adept mage's shout, they all yelled out orders, you idiots, hurry up and kill him. The bandit minions who had surrounded Han Shua immediately sped up their movements when they heard their leaders give the order to kill. They brandished the cheap weapons in their hands and charged towards Han Shua, planning to kill Han Shua before the undead creatures arrived. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, slender jet-black bone spears shot out from the bandits' torches with Han Shua at the center like rays of deadly black light. The speed of the bone spears was extremely fast. At first glance, the continuous bone spears looked as if they were connected together, making Han Shua look like a demonic black peacock with its tail spread open. Ah! Ah ah! The bandits that were charging over let out continuous wails that sounded like concentrated firecrackers. The slender jet-black bone spears easily pierced through their armor, which was only worth a few silver coins, under Han Shua's spread. They either pierced deep into the gaps between their bones or directly penetrated their internal organs, causing blood to fly out. The power of the bone spears that pierced through the bandits' bodies didn't diminish in the slightest, and often had the strength to shoot another bandit behind them to death. This kind of violent impact was truly terrifying. In the blink of an eye, the 30 or so bandits that had charged up were all shot to death by the bone spears. The blood on the ground was a bewitching red under the illumination of the torches that had fallen to the ground. The thick smell of blood instantly spread to the bandit leaders' noses. No, not good. As Raxi watched Han Shua, who was in the middle of a pool of blood and corpses, slowly float up, his feet not touching the ground, the flames of lust in Raxi's body were slowly extinguished by a bone-chilling cold. A raging flame called fear burned everything in his mind. Thump thump, the muffled sound of footsteps pounded on every bandit's heart like the beating of a drum. The things that had only been heard but not been seen all this time appeared one after another behind them. These things had pupilless eye sockets that spewed scorching flames. Under the illumination of the burning eye sockets, enormous black shadows gradually appeared in the darkness. Tuka's lips suddenly became a bit dry, and even his voice wasn't smooth. He stammered, "Everyone, it's the evil knights. Let's run." The hands of the two light mages that had been hired with a large sum of money trembled slightly when they saw the evil knights appear. The purification effect of light magic at their level of strength was limited against these high-level undead creatures. Moreover, there were more than 10 evil knights that had appeared. With the help of the faint hazy light, the sharp-eyed mages could even see that there were even more densely packed shadows behind the 10 evil knights. These bandits had all heard of the rumor that Han Shua's group had killed Trota's bandits at the foot of Mount Tali. However, in their understanding, this was all due to the numerous soldiers of Bretel City, as well as the mountain people that Fulkin had brought down from Mount Tali. How could they have imagined that a Grand Magus necromancer with the mental strength of a Grand Magus and a skeletal staff that could double the number of undead creatures he could summon? Just how many undead creatures would Han Shua be able to summon? "Sorry, we don't want the commission." The light adept mage turned his head to look at Dorcas, then said to the other light journeyman mage, "Give them the gold coins." More than 1,000 gold coins were poured out of the two light mages' money pouches. The adept mage bowed slightly towards Han Shua in the distance and said reverently, "This matter has nothing to do with us. Please let us go. You two despicable mages, you actually dare to run away. I'll kill you first." The leader of Dorcas roared angrily, charging towards the two retreating light mages. "I don't know why, but I hate light mages more and more. In addition, I'm very disgusted by your sudden defection. I think it's best if you stay." Han Shua looked coldly at the two mages who knew how to play it safe and sound and spoke faintly. Due to the dense barrage of bone spears, none of the bandits dared to approach Han Shua. They all stayed as far away from Han Shua as possible. However, there was still a large number of undead creatures closing in on them. No matter how they looked at it, they were doomed. Whoosh! A bandit close to an evil knight was picked up by one of the evil knight's bone spears. The massacre began as the bandit fell to the ground. 10 evil knights and nearly 1,000 undead creatures slowly drowned the bandits in an endless sea of death. In the night that was as dark as ink, the torches were extinguished one by one as the bandits were killed. The darkness of the night affected the bandits' vision, but the undead creatures were like fish in water in the darkness. They silently slaughtered the obstacles in front of them, not knowing the meaning of mercy at all. Dorcas, who also had a look of terror on his face amidst the wretched howls, became an anomaly in the crowd with his torch in hand. The evil night zombies walked past him one after another, but it was as if they didn't know that there was a delicious human body next to them. They only cared about slaughtering the living people around him. Dorcas, who still had his spine ramrod straight, discovered that none of the undead creatures around him attacked him. The terror in his heart gradually receded. Due to the bandits' previous treachery, Dorcas, who had been their aide, felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction as he watched the bandits being slaughtered. Good kill, good kill. These dregs should have been eliminated a long time ago. Dorcas muttered to himself as he watched the bloody massacre with an indifferent expression. Under Han Shua's unceremonious refusal, the two light mages were the first to receive the bandits' fierce attacks. The two light mages, who had originally been able to pose a slight threat to the undead creatures, were quickly drowned out by the bandits' furious attacks. The bandits, who had drowned the two light mages with their sea of people, were then drowned by the undead creatures that surrounded them. As time passed in the pitch-black night, the mournful screams that had been incessant gradually died down. After a while, the only thing left in front of Han Shua was an indifferent Dorcas with a torch in his hand. Apart from him, there was a ground full of corpses and a few ghouls chewing on them. The scene is a bit too bloody, I hope you don't mind. Han Shua smiled as he floated towards Dorcas. The smiling Han Shua didn't seem friendly at all amidst the corpses on the ground. Instead, there was a kind of frightening eeriness to him. The ghouls chewing on the corpses on the ground took the initiative to leave Dorcas when Han Shua approached. It seemed to emphasize that all of this bloody scene originated from this young man with an evil smile. Dorcas took a deep breath, forcefully resisting the urge to vomit. He focused all of his attention on Han Shua, attempting to be indifferent to the tragic scene around him through this method. What do you want? Hehe, I know a few things about you, and also understand the boundless resentment in your heart. I want to give you a chance to take revenge. Han Shua smiled as he made an extremely enticing proposal. A chance. This wasn't something that anyone could give him as a charity. Before Han Shua had displayed the ruthlessness of slaughtering all of the bandits, Dorcas wouldn't have thought that the city lord of Bretel City, who couldn't even fend for himself, would give him much of a chance. But now, Dorcas had reason to believe that as long as Han Shua was willing, a vengeance that was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for him wouldn't be difficult at all in front of this demon-like cruel man. Therefore, Dorcas only hesitated for a moment before nodding. As long as you can take revenge for me, I'll do anything you want me to. Shaking his head, Han Shua smiled as he slowly said, It's not me who will take revenge for you, it's you who will take revenge for yourself. While Dorcas was frowning, Han Shua explained with a light smile, I will give you the chance to take revenge for yourself. As long as you submit to me, with your talent and ability, those two families will be yours sooner or later. Haha, isn't it better to torture them to death yourself than to let someone else kill them? The girl who had been in love with Dorcas had now become the enemy's plaything in bed. Because of the relationship between the girl and Dorcas, her fiancé had always treated her cruelly. The pitiful girl washed her face with tears all day long, but was powerless to do anything about it. Although the girl's family was dissatisfied, they had no right to interfere since their daughter was already married off. Not to mention that the other family's status was a bit higher. Therefore, her father had instead placed all of his resentment on Dorcas and spared no effort in hunting him down. With Dorcas' strength, it could only be said that he was lucky to be able to escape from such a pursuit. The Dark Mantle's intelligence network knew of this information, but in this world where nobles dominated the continent, even if a commoner like Dorcas had astonishing military talent, it wasn't enough to change this unspoken rule that had existed for thousands of years. The Dark Mantle would only kill nobles who had rebelled against the Empire. However, it wasn't a big deal for a noble to occasionally bully a few commoners. If the commoner didn't have any backing, then it was even more of a small matter. The Dark Mantle had countless things to do, so they naturally wouldn't waste their energy on this kind of thing. Being able to make a few sketches in the intelligence report was already giving face to Dorcas' military talent. Otherwise, there probably wouldn't even be a record. I am a fugitive, how can I kill my enemies with my own strength? Dorcas was obviously tempted by Han Shua's suggestion. However, being able to show off his abilities in the Imperial Academy meant that he was no fool. After a moment of silence, he looked at Han Shua and asked. In Bretel City, whether or not you are a fugitive is up to me, the city lord. I know your identity and hatred. Since I dared to accept you, I'm not afraid of your status as a fugitive. Han Shua smiled faintly and pointed in the direction of the 7 Grand Duchies. He said enticingly, apart from the thick hatred in your eyes, I can also see an unconcealable wild ambition. To the 7 Grand Duchies, Bretel City is a hunting ground. However, to me, the 7 Grand Duchies are also a hunting ground. Are you willing to become a hunter like me? Dorcas looked deeply at Han Shua. After a while, he didn't care about the pool of blood on the ground and kowtowed towards Han Shua. He said in a low voice, My Lord Count, I am not a hunter, but I will be your hunting dog. Chapter 329. The sky hadn't brightened yet. Amidst the soft purple and white of dawn, the light of dawn slowly washed away the darkness in the sky. A cool breeze blew gently, and the golden sun gradually burst forth with rays of light after a while. When Han Shua and Dorcas returned to Bretel City, they were surprised to find that Fok's group of knights had also just arrived. Han Shua could see traces of battle on their bodies, some of them even gone forever. Dorcas rode a weak warhorse that he'd obtained from the bandits, following Han Shua at a moderate pace as he entered Bretel City. The first thing he saw were the two extremely intimidating magic crystal cannons on the city walls. The previously dilapidated city walls had not only been repaired, but they were now bright and clean. Even the height of the city had been increased. From a distance, Dorcas actually felt that Bretel City was a bit more magnificent. Nodding inwardly, Dorcas turned his head to look at Han Shua, who had a somewhat gloomy expression on his face as he quickly entered the city. He understood that the reason Bretel City could have such a change was all thanks to this new city lord. What's going on? Did some unforeseen event happen again? Where are the merchants and the war equipment? Han Shua floated over like a ghost. His cold voice floated over along with the cool morning breeze, scaring the still shaken Fok. When Fok turned around and saw that it was Han Shua, he breathed a sigh of relief. He hastily straightened his body and explained, "My lord, there was indeed an accident on the way. Our torches attracted the attention of the bandits roaming in the night. Fortunately, that area is close to Mount Tali. Before the bandits arrived, the leader of the mountain people, Fulkin, came down the mountain to help us. The merchants and the war equipment are safe and sound, only 3 knights were killed." Han Shua's tense heart slowly calmed down when he heard that the merchants and the city's defense equipment were safe. He looked at Fok and nodded. His tone softened a bit as he said, "Bury the dead knights. Before the 7 Grand Duchies arrive at Bretel City, our first task is to annihilate all the bandits in the surroundings. Rest assured, my lord. I, Fok, guarantee that I will avenge my brothers." Fok's tone was resolute as he drew his sword and pointed it at the sky, making a solemn vow. Dorcas rode on a frail warhorse and approached with the sound of clattering steps. He'd already carefully examined the surrounding defensive measures along the way, a pensive look in his eyes. When he arrived in front of Han Shua, he finally shifted his gaze to Han Shua and suggested, "Before Bretel City and Sea Mist City, there were a total of 17 bandit groups. Apart from the 5 that you annihilated last night, there are currently 12 groups left. These bandits aren't large, but are as annoying as flies. I think you should eliminate them first. Otherwise, the merchants will be in danger in the future." "City Lord, are all those greedy bandits dead?" Fok inquired after hearing Dorcas' words. Nodding, Han Shua replied, "That's right, those 5 bandit groups are finished. Let me introduce you. This is Dorcas from the Imperial Military Academy. Perhaps you've heard of his deeds before. From today onwards, he's your colleague. No one is allowed to mention his status as a fugitive in the future." "Yes, my lord." Fok immediately replied, looking at Dorcas with admiration in his eyes. However, he didn't ask Han Shua how Dorcas had joined Bretel City. This time, from the robbery to the transaction, it had all been planned by this person. From start to finish, Dorcas had held the initiative, toying with them in the palm of his hand. Even Han Shua had to hand over 50,000 gold coins in the end. This person's intelligence was truly outstanding. Han Shua, who'd hovered between life and death many times, had broken through again and again to become a city lord with the title of count. As for that little fatty who'd been gluttonous and greedy all day, he was still working as an accountant at the Bust Merchant Guild. This kid eats and drinks well in the Bust Merchant Guild and won't encounter any danger. Phoebe even takes special care of him for my sake. Although his life isn't exactly exciting, it's probably quite comfortable." Han Shua looked at the little fatty who was drooling in his sleep and smiled as he muttered to himself. Without waking up little fatty Jack, who was sleeping soundly, Han Shua looked at Jack through the window for a while and prepared to leave for now. He'd talk again after they'd slept. Han Shua had only taken a few steps when he suddenly heard a loud yell from Fabian's room. Han Shua entered Fabian's room like a ghost and suddenly found Fabian sitting up on his bed, drenched in sweat. His face was full of lingering fear. It turned out that he'd had a terrifying nightmare. When he saw Han Shuo suddenly walk in, Fabian, who'd just woken up from his nightmare, cried out involuntarily again. He only abruptly stopped his panicked yells when he saw that the person was Han Shuo. He flashed an ugly smile at Han Shuo and said a bit embarrassedly, "I've been too used to following the mist these past few years. I've only discovered that I'm more and more afraid of death now that I've suddenly encountered danger. Perhaps it's because I'm old and no longer yearn for grand adventures. I just want to live a peaceful life in peace." Han Shuo recalled the scene of their first meeting after Fabian's words and revealed a relaxed smile. Han Shuo found a chair for himself and sat down, saying to Fabian, "This is how life is. If you want to obtain more wealth and a more illustrious position, you must pay greater risks. Haha, it's because of my negligence that you've met with such an accident this time. It's a good thing that no one's hurt, otherwise I really wouldn't be able to forgive myself." Apart from Fabian and Jack, the rest of the merchants were only doing this because they were beneficial to Han Shuo. If those merchants had died, Han Shuo would only feel regret and immediately think of ways to make up for the crisis of trust that might arise from their deaths with the other merchants. However, Han Shuo had feelings for Jack and Fabian, especially Jack. He'd been Han Shuo's best friend when he had nothing. If he lost his life because of Han Shuo's negligence, he would never be able to forgive himself. Perhaps he'd be crushed by self-blame in a short period of time. Fabian looked at the imposing youth in front of him who was more than 1.9 meters tall and tried to merge him with the thin shadow in the dark forest. However, he discovered that he couldn't merge the two even though they were clearly one person. This wasn't because of the difference in body size and height. Time could change everything. Fabian couldn't help but lament that he was becoming more and more timid as he grew older. However, the Han Shuo in front of him had grown from a youth to a youth that no one dared to look down on. Han Shuo's strength was growing stronger and stronger, and he was gradually making a name for himself in the upper class of the empire. His Majesty the King had dared to let him take over the terrible mess that was Bretel City. This was definitely not a demotion, as outsiders who didn't understand the situation would think. This should be the sharpening of an unstoppable sword. Fabian looked at the youth in front of him whose eyes were deep and whose thoughts were becoming more and more indecipherable. He suddenly had a flash of enlightenment. "This is a letter that Miss Phoebe asked me to personally deliver to you." Fabian took out a letter with the color of roses on it and a faint fragrance curling around it, handing it over to Han Shuo in a slightly respectful manner. "All right, old Fabian, you can continue to rest. Those frightened merchants still need you to wake up and help pacify them. Bretel City has 100 businesses waiting to flourish. Our cooperation with the major merchant guilds will definitely become closer in the future. Apart from weapons and equipment that we currently lack, we will also need an unending supply of food and medicine in the future. We will still need to trouble you for this." Han Shuo put away the fragrant letter and said to Fabian with a smile, "Hee, with your and Miss Phoebe's light attribute, the Buzzed Merchant Guild will definitely support Bretel City with all its might." Fabian understood the relationship between the two and winked at Han Shuo, teasing him without losing his sense of humor. "Of course, I won't mistreat the Buzzed Merchant Guild. Including your president Phoebe," Han Shuo said with a smile and walked out of Fabian's room with a cheerful expression. The open door was slowly closed by a force after Han Shuo's figure had gone far away. He's becoming more and more powerful. Miss is indeed a true merchant, knowing to invest everything in him before he succeeds. It looks like the Buzzed Merchant Guild will definitely become even more glorious in Miss's hands. Fabian murmured thoughtfully as he watched the door close automatically despite the lack of wind. "Phoebe, oh Phoebe, I've received your longing." In Han Shuo's own room, Han Shuo muttered to himself with a doting smile after he finished reading the fragrant letter. *****. 3 days later, Bretel City was brimming with a joyous atmosphere. The city lord's mansion at the center of the city was filled with laughter and chatter. The food festival wasn't a big festival in the Lancelot Empire. However, since the merchants had safely arrived in Bretel City, and Han Shuo wanted to spread some information through their mouths, the food festival was treated with great importance. Long tables over 10 meters long were put together in front of the city lord's mansion. All kinds of exquisite desserts and delicious, steaming hot food were sent out from the mansion's wide-open doors. Any commoner in Bretel City could freely enjoy these free foods and gorge themselves to their heart's content. The civilians who heard the news went from doubtful at first to frenzied. The transition time did not take more than 10 seconds. The knights in shining armor maintained the order with a polite smile on their faces. Within the city lord's mansion, even more exquisite delicacies were placed on the luxurious sandalwood round tables. The merchants who'd escaped death enjoyed the food to their heart's content under Han Shuo's hospitality. Fabian of the Buzzed Merchant Guild seemed to have become half the host, helping Han Shuo entertain these guests who'd come from afar. Amidst laughter and chatter, he stuffed the gold coins they deserved for the war chariots and equipment into their palms. The merchants who'd received their rewards were beaming with joy, praising the refined and smiling Han Shuo endlessly. They declared that this business was only a good start. As long as Han Shuo needed anything, it would be delivered to him in an endless stream. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Han Shuo's loud and clear voice reverberated through the entire hall, holding a crystal cup of red wine in his hand. The mercenary merchants were in a good mood after receiving their rewards. One by one, they stopped their cheerful chatter and looked at the extraordinary bearing of Han Shuo with smiles, waiting for Han Shuo to continue. When the clamor gradually died down, Han Shuo smiled and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this business is only the beginning. Bretel City needs an endless supply of goods. The ores mined from the surrounding mountains and rivers are also priceless. In the future, everyone will definitely be able to obtain even more wealth in the city." After a pause, the smile on Han Shuo's face receded. He raised his voice somewhat solemnly and said, "As a city that's been ravaged by bandits and foreign countries for many years, Bretel City has experienced too many hardships and sufferings. There's never been a city in the Lancelot Empire that has endured more pain and humiliation than Bretel City. His Majesty bestowed Bretel City to me. While my heart is heavy, I also bear the mission of making Bretel City prosper once again. However, my strength alone is limited. I will create good conditions for everyone so that everyone can obtain what they need in Bretel City." The merchants weren't stingy with applause that didn't cost them money. After the rain-like applause, the banquet that wasn't too sumptuous continued. Little fatty Jack and Fabian walked together in front of Han Shuo. Jack raised his head to look at the imposing Han Shuo and said, "Brian, I don't want to stay in Asen City anymore. That's too boring and unexciting. Let me stay in Bretel City, I can help you." Han Shuo was stunned. He subconsciously raised his cup and clinked it with Jack, draining the last drop of wine in his cup. He hesitated for a moment before slowly saying, "Jack, only the two of us know how deep our relationship is. It's not that I don't want you to stay, but Bretel City is a dangerous place. Your life may be in danger at any time. As a true friend, I advise you to stay in the Buzzed Merchant Guild. At least you'll always be safe and worry-free." The fat on Jack's face shook as he shook his head. He glanced at the equally surprised Fabian beside him and said, "The Buzzed Merchant Guild is too dull. I'm still very young. Miss Phoebe and you have always taken care of me, and I'm very grateful. However, Jessica said that the person she likes should be a knight or a noble with rich experience. I also feel that I should work harder. Miss Phoebe can't make me a knight or a noble, but perhaps Brian can." Han Shuo was speechless. He hadn't thought that because of a girl, this usually cowardly little fatty Jack would actually have a dangerous item called ambition in his heart. Chapter 330. Jack, are you really prepared to face danger? Fabian could see Jack's youthful drive from him. Recalling Jack's heroic spirit of not fearing danger, Fabian sighed and asked Jack. Nodding his head heavily, Jack stubbornly said, "Yes, I've decided." Seeing Jack so insistent, Fabian shook his head and didn't say anything else. he understood that Jack had truly grown up. Perhaps it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to temper himself at this age. Not to mention that Fabian understood that Han Shuo would definitely take care of Jack and wouldn't let Jack get hurt. Fabian's silence indicated that he was at least no longer opposed. When Jack looked at Han Shuo expectantly, Han Shuo, who was half a head taller than Jack, walked in front of him and patted Jack's shoulder, saying sincerely, "Don't be in a hurry to make a decision. Stay in Bretel City for a few days. Let me know when you've thought it through." Bretel City wouldn't be peaceful during this time. Perhaps Jack would automatically dispel this idea when he truly experienced the cruelty of war, Han Shuo thought to himself. Han Shuo didn't continue this topic with Jack afterwards. Instead, he became interested in the girl Jack liked called Jessica and asked a few questions about this girl. From Jack's stammering narration, Han Shuo learned that this girl called Jessica was the daughter of a minor noble. Her father had met Jack when he was doing business with the Bust Merchant Guild. Up until now, Jack had only had a one-sided crush on her. Jack, who was only an accountant at the Bust Merchant Guild, was naturally unable to attract the attention of this noble daughter. Not to mention that apart from his fat body, Jack didn't have any assets to be proud of. Jack had also indirectly gotten Jessica's request for a partner from Jessica. In this profound continent where nobles dominated, even the owner of the Bust Merchant Guild, Phoebe, wasn't accepted by the upper class, let alone a lowly accountant like him. Therefore, on one hand, it was out of his fanatical love for Jessica, and on the other hand, perhaps because Jack truly had the desire to improve himself. That was why he hoped to borrow Han Shuo's help. The banquet ended in a joyous atmosphere. The commoners outside the city lord's mansion were still unwilling to disperse after hearing the news. The allure of free food was far beyond Han Shuo's imagination. The servants he'd recruited this time were busy for an entire day, but still couldn't supply enough food. They dragged it out until the sun had set and night was about to fall. Only then did the commoners disperse under the amicable persuasion of the knights. The moon that had disappeared last night was incomparably bright tonight, as if it wanted to make up for yesterday's laziness. Standing on the tallest clock in the city, Han Shuo looked down at Bretel City shrouded in the misty moonlight. The vast Bretel City covered an enormous area. Houses stood in great numbers between the 4 city gates. It was completely capable of accommodating millions of people. The original purpose of Bretel City's construction was to serve as a base point for invading the 7 Grand Duchies. Even after experiencing vicissitudes and humiliation, Bretel City still possessed an impressive height. If it hadn't suffered repeated failures during the invasion of the 7 Grand Duchies and suffered fatal damage from the allied forces of the 7 Grand Duchies, Bretel City would have become one of the most secure cities in the Lancelot Empire. Large amounts of gold coins had been invested. Han Shuo didn't hesitate to raise the height of the newly renovated Bretel City. The 6 magic crystal cannons on the city walls were a great deterrent. Now, even more war chariots and catapults had been added to the originally empty city walls. All kinds of heavy firepower equipment had been set up. Unknowingly, Bretel City, this enormous war machine that should have revealed its malevolence long ago, had begun to slowly bare its sinister fangs after millions of gold coins had been invested. It was ready to crush any arrogant person who dared to invade at any time. In the direction of Seamist City, a company of 1,000 soldiers gradually returned. The weapons of this company belonging to Dorcas were bright and shiny. Compared to the weapons of the random bandits from last night, they couldn't even be mentioned in the same breath. Every longsword was worth at least 3 gold coins, while the armor and helmets were all forged from fine steel, worth 5 gold coins. In addition to the nimble sharp weapons like crossbows and daggers, every soldier's equipment was worth 10 gold coins. However, these soldiers that should have been knights had temporarily become foot soldiers due to the lack of warhorses. Warhorses were a scarce resource even in the Lancelot Empire. Although the 7 Grand Duchies were experts in raising warhorses, it was a pity that Han Shuo didn't have the means to purchase them. Under the leadership of Dorcas, 1,000 soldiers marched towards Bretel City in an orderly manner. These people had obviously experienced many battles. Their expressions were cold and detached, and their eyes were filled with hidden madness. Although their armor and weapons were polished to a dazzling shine, the bloodstains under their breastplates were extremely obvious. Han Shua, who was looking into the distance from the highest point of the city lord's mansion, looked at Dorcas for a while. He said in a low voice with satisfaction, "In 3 days, all 12 bandit groups have been annihilated. Out of the 1,000 soldiers, 960 have returned. Only 40 have died. What a talent!" Half an hour later, Dorcas had changed into a clean set of clothes and arrived at the city lord's mansion under the bright moonlight. He was received by Han Shua in his living room. "Dorcas, you did well. Have all 12 bandit groups been annihilated?" Han Shua asked with a smile as he looked at Dorcas, who was kneeling on one knee. Dorcas shook his head and raised his head to look at Han Shua, saying, "My lord Count, there are still 700 or so survivors." Frowning, Han Shua wasn't in a hurry to have Dorcas stand up. His fingers subconsciously tapped on the armrest of his chair as he narrowed his eyes at Dorcas, asking, "Dorcas, you brought 1,000 soldiers with you. With your methods, you shouldn't have let 700 bandits escape, right?" Dorcas raised his head to look at Han Shua, replying expressionlessly, "My lord Count, all 12 bandit groups have been annihilated. All obstacles between Seamist City and Bretel City have been eliminated. However, this lowly one believes that blindly slaughtering is not a good method. Those 700 bandits didn't deserve to die. They were forced to make a living and had no other choice. This lowly one believes that if your lordship wants to develop Bretel City as quickly as possible, then you must add an appropriate amount of appeasement to the sharp weapon of slaughter. These people who have lost their bandit leaders are very easy to tame. Once they've been tempered and sincerely believe in your lordship, they can also become your lordship's loyal and valiant warriors." Han Shua was silent for a while after hearing Dorcas' words. He looked Dorcas in the eye and slowly nodded, saying, "Dorcas, you're right. I was indeed thoughtless. So you've subdued all 700 bandits, but I didn't see them?" Dorcas nodded, still kneeling on one knee in front of Han Shua before Han Shua gave the order. He said respectfully, "That's right, all 742 bandits have pledged allegiance. They're currently cleaning up the battlefield under my orders. My lord, the road from Seamist City to Bretel City is littered with the rotting corpses of refugees. This kind of environment doesn't seem suitable for Bretel City's development, so I ordered the bandits to clean up all the eyesores along the way." "Very good, Dorcas. You've done very well. Oh, right, weren't you afraid that the bandits would flee when all your men returned?" Han Shua first praised, then asked with some doubt in his heart. "My lord might not know, but the lives of the bandits aren't much better than those of the refugees. I only promised them the treatment of ordinary soldiers in Bretel City, and they agreed without any hesitation." Dorcas replied. He paused for a moment, then took out a bag of money and handed it to Han Shua with both hands, saying, "The 12 bandit groups obtained a total of 37,200 gold coins. There were also some gold, silver, jade, and ores worth about 80 to 90,000 gold coins. The soldiers brought them back to the warehouse. As for the worthless weapons, they were temporarily hoarded in one of the bandits' lair because they weren't worth much and were heavy. I didn't think there was a need to bring them back, so I left them there." "Good, very good. You've thought things through. Get up, I'll remember your great contribution in this matter. As long as you continue like this, you'll get what you need sooner or later." Han Shua looked deeply at Dorcas, saying, "Bretel City is a stage for you. It looks like you've gradually adapted to your role. Our empire's armies have invaded the 7 Grand Duchies many times to no avail, but since we're standing here now, we must seize this opportunity to soar to the top at all costs. We'll show those mediocre people of the empire what they can't do. This lowly one swears to follow my lord to the death." Dorcas shouted in a low voice, straightening his spine in front of Han Shua like another invincible, demon's lair edge. "All right, you may leave. Keep these gold coins for now. Consider them your pay for equipping the weapons and armor of those 700 new soldiers." Han Shua motioned for Dorcas to leave. After Dorcas left, Han Shua sank into deep thought. He thought about Dorcas' words about the appropriate amount of conciliation, and felt that Dorcas' words did indeed make some sense. The next day, early in the morning, Dick hurriedly came to see Han Shua, reporting to Han Shua, "My lord, several bandit groups of the same size as Troda are currently gathered in a dense forest 20 miles in front of Bretel City. This lowly one received this news from a Dark Mantle member who was on a mission in the 7 Grand Duchies. I heard that there are 15,000 bandit groups this time, and they're preparing to wildly plunder our city. They should be here soon." Han Shua snorted coldly, saying, "Send people to pay close attention to their movements." 15,000 bandits, this will be the first true challenge to Bretel City. My lord, do you want this lowly one to notify the mountain chief on the mountain? With just 3,000 soldiers defending Bretel City, it's too dangerous this time. The mountain chiefs might even help us. Dick suggested. Shaking his head, Han Shua said, "Not for now. This is a test for us. Whether or not we can make them behave in the future will depend on the results of this battle." Humph, although we only have 3,000 soldiers, the current Bretel City is no longer the same dilapidated city walls as before. I've spent so many gold coins, how can Bretel City be so easily breached? The reason why Han Shua dared to say this was because he had some confidence. The soldiers hiding on top of the tall city walls could use the heavy firepower of war chariots and catapults to bombard the city. The other 6 magic crystal cannons weren't to be trifled with. In the worst-case scenario, Han Shua could still summon the undead army to participate in the battle. Han Shua believed that it wouldn't be so easy for 15,000 bandits to breach the current Bretel City. Before anyone knew it, Bretel City had already become under martial law. Soldiers were often seen dragging huge rocks on the streets. But for some reason, the huge war chariots and magic crystal cannons that the commoners saw every day were pulled to the back with grey cloth, as if they were afraid of being discovered. Towards this new city lord, the commoners were indifferent at the beginning, but now, they gradually became more interested. The news of the annihilation of the bandits on Mount Tali, as well as the annihilation of a dozen bandit groups between Seamist City and Bretel City, had long since spread throughout Bretel City through deliberate propaganda. In addition to the endless supply of food from the city lord's mansion during the food festival yesterday, the commoners in the city had had a great feast. Their resistance towards the new city lord had gradually lessened. However, they were already used to the city lord's betrayal at critical times. Before the true crisis arrived, would this new city lord be able to withstand the test? Was he worthy of their trust? It was still an unknown at the moment. Therefore, these commoners hadn't truly opened their hearts to the new city lord yet. They only observed the changes in Bretel City silently. Another day passed, and all 4 of Bretel City's city gates were closed. No merchants or commoners were allowed to leave. The sparse soldiers on the 4 city gates were all vigilant. Several squads of knights patrolled back and forth on their warhorses without rest. Although these knights didn't say much, the commoners of Bretel City, who had experienced the pain of war, could already smell a familiar scent from these traces. War was coming. Chapter 331. On the plains 10 miles away from Bretel City, 4 bandit groups were slowly making their way towards Bretel City. Unlike the small bandit groups that roamed between Bretel City and Seamist City, the Bloodfang bandits, with the smallest number of bandits, had more than 2,000 people. The Greenfire bandits, with the largest number, had more than 6,000 people. Their numbers were double that of Bretel City's city guards. These bandit groups were the same as the exterminated Redbeard bandits of Troda. They were calamities that frequently roamed the cities and towns of the 7 Grand Duchies. Wherever they went, the cities and towns of the 7 Grand Duchies that had been looted would be swept clean. Since the 7 Grand Duchies were constantly at war with each other and there were many mountains and hills between the 7 Grand Duchies that they could hide in, these bandits were like fish in water. They had become vermin that the 7 Grand Duchies abhorred. Unlike ordinary bandit groups, these bandits were well equipped. Some of them were originally military officers from the 7 Grand Duchies. They'd brought their subordinates to join the bandits because they were at odds with the nobles of their duchies or had committed some serious crime. These people were originally regular soldiers. Although they'd become bandits, their discipline and combat knowledge hadn't been neglected at all. After becoming bandits, the wealth they'd plundered was used to equip their soldiers and warhorses. Their equipment and combat strength weren't any weaker than the regular armies of the 7 Grand Duchies. The 4 bandit groups that had come to Bretel City this time were the Greenfire Bandits, the Tomahawk Bandits, the Wyvern Bandits, and the Bloodfang Bandits. The Tomahawk Bandits and the Wyvern Bandits had more than 4,000 people and 3,000 people respectively. They were bloodthirsty bandits that had been tempered for a long time. At this time, the leaders of the 4 bandit groups were walking in the middle of the group, still discussing matters regarding the attack on Bretel City. Is Bretel City really as rich as you say it is? I just went there half a year ago. There didn't seem to be anything valuable there apart from stones. The brothers that went with me didn't get anything. The leader of the Bloodfang Bandits, Rains, said with some skepticism. This time, Rains had been invited by the other 3. He had originally planned to take action against a small town in Helen Duchy. If it wasn't for the fact that he understood that the other 3 were even more greedy, Rains definitely wouldn't have been willing to participate in Bretel City's plundering operation. Bretel City is different from before. It's said that the new city lord is extremely wealthy. He even robbed that bitch Helen of Helen Duchy's magic crystal cannon. There are even rumors that Helen was raped by the new city lord. Damn it, that Helen is a famous beauty in the 7 Grand Duchies, and she's also the Grand Duke of Helen Duchy. I didn't expect that the new city lord would actually steal her first prize. It's really inconceivable. The leader of the Tomahawk Bandits, Bynum, was a boorish man who was over 2 meters tall. He carried a huge tomahawk that was 1.5 meters long on his back. His exposed skin and fur made him look like a half-orc. Lions, I've received accurate information. Bretel City is definitely different from before. Just the 6 magic crystal cannons alone are worth 600,000 gold coins. Adding the gold coins from the city lord and the merchants, Bretel City now has at least 1 million gold coins. The leader of the Greenfire Bandits, Fass, explained to Rains. Fass had once been a high-ranking military officer in Forest Duchy, one of the 7 Grand Duchies. He'd made a name for himself in the battles between the 7 Grand Duchies, but he'd been dismissed because he'd wantonly slaughtered captives in battle. When he'd received the news, Fass had simply led his subordinates to do the robbing business. After switching from a high-ranking military officer to a bandit, Fass had become even more like a fish in water. He'd expanded the Greenfire Bandits to over 6,000 members, no longer subject to anyone's restrictions. Among the 4 bandit groups, Fass Greenfire Bandits not only had the most members, but also the strongest combat strength. After all, Fass had once been a regular soldier and had a set of methods for leading troops into battle. After hearing Fass' explanation, the other 3 bandits, including the sinister-looking leader of the Flying Dragon Bandits, Afai, all revealed greedy gazes. 1 million gold coins was a large sum in anyone's eyes. Not to mention these greedy bandits, even the dukes of the 7 Grand Duchies would come to plunder the city if they found out, right? Fass is indeed amazing. Ha, 1 million gold coins. Just based on Bretel City's defensive measures, we've really struck it rich this time. Battleaxe's Bynum laughed maniacally, as if he could see a sky full of gold coins raining down on him. Afai of the Flying Dragon Bandits glanced at Bynum disdainfully, thinking, what an idiot. If Bretel City was so easy to attack, why didn't the equally cruel and greedy Fass swallow it all for himself? Why would he be so kind as to invite us to share the profits? Among the 4 great bandits, although Fass was cruel and greedy, and had a way of leading troops into battle, his personality wasn't too sinister, nor was he that scheming. On the other hand, the leader of the Flying Dragon Bandits, Afai, was nicknamed the Poison Dragon. This poison referred to how vicious and poisonous his heart was, and how he was extremely adept at using despicable and sinister tricks. Afai's mind spun for a moment when he heard Fass mention the 1 million gold coins. He secretly made up his mind. When they arrived at Bretel City, he definitely couldn't be the main force. At the very least, he had to observe the situation first, lest he accidentally throw away the capital he'd painstakingly accumulated. With the temptation and yearning for gold coins, the bandits of the 4 bandit bands wore clothes of different colors as they gradually made their way to Bretel City. The tall and magnificent city walls towered in front of them. The newly renovated city walls no longer had a single hole in them. From the outside, Bretel City seemed to have the faint shadow of a firm defensive line. Oh, Bretel City has really changed a lot. I remember the last time I came here, there were some holes in front of the city gates. The walls weren't this tall either. We easily broke through and didn't meet any decent resistance. It looks like Bretel City is indeed different. Lance couldn't help but exclaim in surprise as he raised his head to look at Bretel City. Fass, where are the magic crystal cannons you were talking about? The leader of the Battleaxe bandits, Bynum, firmly remembered that the magic crystal cannons were worth 600,000 gold coins. He didn't think too much about the terrifying might of the magic crystal cannons. He was only thinking about how to exchange the cannons for dazzling gold coins after obtaining them. Every time he imagined the scene of him drowning in gold coins, Bynum felt a sense of satisfaction. Fass didn't immediately answer Bynum's question from atop his tall warhorse. Instead, he ordered the Greenfire bandits behind him to line up and prepare for battle at a moment's notice. When the Greenfire bandits were all ready, Fass gazed at the distant city walls. He discovered that there really didn't seem to be any magic crystal cannons on the tall city walls. Fass furrowed his brows and thought for a moment before saying, "The magic crystal cannons are definitely in Bretel City. You only need to remember this. Bretel City has a total of 4 city gates. Each of our 4 groups will attack 1 gate each. According to our previous agreement, we will attack Bretel City together after seeing my signal. Bretel City's city guard only has 3,000 people. Each gate can only be defended by 1,000 people at most. You've all heard of their combat strength. As long as you spread out your troops when attacking, the magic crystal cannons won't be able to cause much damage to you. In addition, the magic crystal cannons require magic crystal ores to fill them. There are still gaps between each shot. They may not have enough magic crystal ores, so you don't need to be afraid. As long as any of our 4 groups break through the city walls, Bretel City will be finished with our strength. There may be some casualties this time, but think about the 1,000,000 gold coins. Those dazzling gold coins are piled up in the city lord's mansion. If we want them, how can we not shed some blood?" Bynum rubbed his hands together and said excitedly, "I can't wait. All right, leave the main city gate to us. The 3 of you decide which gate to attack. I'll send out the signal in 2 hours and we'll attack together. Whoever breaks through the gate first will get 40% of the gold coins," Fass said in a low voice. This was a plan they'd discussed long ago. No one had any objections. Therefore, the 3 bandits discussed for a while and then left. Poison Dragon, a Phi of the Flying Dragon bandits, instructed his subordinates as he walked towards the gate he'd chosen, "Pay attention to those 3 gates. Once they attack, immediately send me the signal of what you see. Don't worry, leader. We know what to do." One of the bandits nodded and left with the others in a wretched manner. They'd long since known that their leader was extremely treacherous and had long since gotten used to this kind of thing. Afai didn't want his Flying Dragon bandits to test just how strong Bretel City's defenses really were. In addition, Afai was afraid that Fass was purposely using them as cannon fodder. He carefully guarded against Fass in case Bretel City possessed any powerful firepower. If that was the case, Afai would consider whether or not he should follow Fass' orders. The temptation of 1,000,000 gold coins was indeed very great. However, if he didn't have the life to enjoy it, Afai would naturally escape without hesitation. He definitely wouldn't care about Fass' prior arrangements. Only by preserving his strength would he have more opportunities to make a fortune in the future. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth it if he lost all his capital. ***** Within Bretel City, Han Shua, Dorcas, Falk, Dick, and the others had just left the city lord's mansion after a secret discussion. Han Shua, Dorcas, and Falk each headed for one of the city gates, while Dick Chester, Fabian, and the others headed for another. The remaining demon floated around, clearly hearing the conversation of the four bandit groups. The large firepower tools on the tall city walls were temporarily put away. The sparse soldiers on the city walls only raised their bows and crossbows, vigilantly watching the bandit groups in the distance. Of the four gates, the one Han Shua guarded had the least number of soldiers and weapons. There were only a mere 300 soldiers, and not a single magic crystal cannon. However, he had to face the 6,000 men of the Greenfire Bandits. The Greenfire Bandits were the strongest, and also the main force this time. "Brian, are you confident?" Little Fatty Jack's voice trembled a bit as he looked at the dense mass of bandits in front of him. It wasn't as smooth as usual. Jack had come under Han Shua's request. Han Shua had Jack say this before he came over: "Watch this battle with me. If you're willing to stay after this battle, I'll agree to let you become my Bretel City's financial officer." When Jack heard Han Shua's words, he agreed without the slightest hesitation. But now that he was truly standing on top of the tall city walls and looking at the well-equipped and fierce-looking bandits, his heart still trembled a bit. "What, scared?" Han Shua laughed lightly and teased Jack. Suddenly puffing out his chest, Jack shouted as if trying to convince himself, "What's there to be afraid of? I'm just a bit nervous for the first time. Besides, I'll only be a financial officer in Bretel City. It's not like I need to fight on the battlefield. What's there to be afraid of?" "Very good. If you can persevere until the end of this battle and remain as strong as you are now, I guarantee that you'll be able to obtain that noble Lady Jessica." Han Shua chuckled. When he heard Han Shua mention Jessica, little Fatty Jack's eyes first dimmed, but it was immediately replaced with determination. He nodded heavily and clenched his chubby hands, looking at Han Shua. "Brian, although I can't become a knight, I will definitely become a noble." Han Shua smiled without saying a word. He gazed at the Greenfire Bandits in the distance. They were using some simple wooden frames to erect a tall wooden tower. With the help of the bandits, a dozen or so magi of various elements gradually walked up to the top of the tower. The strongest among these magicians was a lightning archmage. The rest were minor magicians of various elements. Magicians were rare and could be put in important positions by any country on the continent. The degree to which they were put in important positions depended on the level of their strength. It was said that the reason the Greenfire Bandits had a lightning archmage was because they had kidnapped the archmage's family to threaten him. Otherwise, an archmage naturally wouldn't be willing to be an accomplice of a lowly bandit. The mages on the wooden tower were equipped with extraordinary equipment. Not only were their magic robes exceptionally exquisite, but each of them was also equipped with an expensive magic staff. It seemed that Fass had invested quite a bit in them. Thinking about it, it made sense. Mages were extremely useful in battle. A bandit band with mages would naturally greatly increase their strength. In addition, for a bandit leader, having an archmage in his band was also a symbol of status. The wooden tower was 600 meters away from Han Shua, and there were pulleys at the bottom of the tower that could be pushed. A few bandits also climbed up the wooden tower with shields in hand, protecting the precious mages in the center so that they could cast their magic without worry. When the battle really started, they could use the wheels under the tower to push it closer to the city walls, allowing the mages to better cast their magic on Bretel City. 600 meters wasn't an unreachable distance for Han Shua with the Demon's Lair edge. Once the Demon's Lair edge flew out, the mages within 600 meters would definitely be caught off guard and suffer disastrous casualties. However, the battle had yet to start. It wouldn't be wise for Han Shua to release the Demon's Lair edge at this time. Therefore, he could only watch helplessly as they finished setting up the wooden tower. When the wooden tower was set up, the bandits also pushed out 4 ballistae that could fire 6 bolts in a row. These ballistae had a range of around 500 meters and could fire 6 bolts with astonishing penetrative power. Han Shua had also purchased 20 of these from the Buzd Merchant Guild this time. Currently, there were 5 hidden on the city walls. Han Shua was well aware of the penetrative power of these ballistae. Jack, when the battle starts, don't leave my side no matter what. I can guarantee your safety within 10 meters of me. Once you're 10 meters away from me, immediately get down on the ground and climb into the city walls. Do you understand? When he saw that the bandits actually had ballistae, Han Shua immediately turned to look at little fatty Jack and cautiously instructed him. Jack became a bit nervous after hearing Han Shua's words. He hastily moved a bit closer to Han Shua, almost touching Han Shua's body. He said in a dry voice, "Don't worry, I'll follow you wherever you go." After the wooden tower and the ballistae were pushed out, the leader of the Green Fire Bandits, Fass, stood out with an arrogant expression on his face. He raised his head and shouted at Han Shua, "Brett, tell City Lord Brian, you know why we brothers have come. Our living conditions aren't good and we've been starving recently. As long as you take out 1,000,000 gold coins, we brothers will turn around and leave. We won't touch a single hair of Brettel City. Pitiful Mr. Fass, I deeply sympathize with your group's misfortune. However, Brettel City is famous for its barrenness. The commoners in my territory don't even have enough to eat. I really can't take out 1,000,000 gold coins." Han Shua sighed with a distressed expression. His voice wasn't loud or soft, but the bandits in the distance and the soldiers on the city walls all heard him clearly. Even some of the nearby citizens of Brettel City heard him. Many of the more courageous citizens even came out of their houses to listen carefully. Some even tried to go to the city gates to see what was going on. Then how many gold coins can you take out? Fass froze for a moment when he heard that Han Shua's words seemed to leave room for negotiation. There wasn't a single hole in Brettel City right now. Although there weren't many soldiers on the tall city walls, they were all equipped with shiny weapons. He'd heard that Brettel City Lord Brian was also a necromancer. If they really attacked, Green Fire Bandits would definitely suffer losses. If they could obtain a generous amount of gold coins without wasting a single soldier, anyone would know what to do as long as they weren't an idiot. Therefore, when he heard Han Shua's tone, Fass thought for a moment before asking Han Shua what his bottom line was. Mr. Fass, how about 1 gold coin? Han Shua thought seriously from atop the city wall and asked Fass in a loud, serious voice. Waha, the soldiers guarding the city had been a bit nervous at first, but they couldn't help but burst into laughter when they heard Han Shua's words. Even some of the citizens within Brettel City who'd heard the laughter had an amused smile on their faces. They thought that this new city lord had quite a sense of humor. "You're fucking messing with me." Fass was enraged. He hadn't been this angry in a long time. The bandits under him all had ugly expressions on their faces. They wanted nothing more than to rush over and tear Han Shua's group to pieces. So what if I messed with you? You'll get a gold coin today. Maybe you'll even leave some for this city lord to use. You trash dared to rob me, you're clearly tired of living. I'll tell you the truth. I've already robbed all of Redbeard Trota's treasures. Add that to Helentina's 400,000 gold coins and my own gold coins. Brettel City now has far more than 1,000,000 gold coins. If you want to take it, you'll have to see if you have the ability. Stupid pig, come. Han Shua laughed maniacally from atop the city walls. He pointed at Fass in the distance as if he was mocking an idiot. Fass was truly enraged. It had been many years since Fass had been looked down upon like this since he'd left Narsen Duchy. Looking at the incomparably arrogant young city lord on the opposite city wall, Fass had the urge to eat him alive. The bandits under him also felt the same way. Their faces were ashen as they charged towards Brettel City's city gates. Attack! Massacre the city for me! Fass roared furiously, giving the order to attack Brettel City in front of them. Massacre the city! Jack's knees went soft, almost collapsing onto the ice-cold marble floor. When the citizens of Brettel City heard the 2 words, massacre the city, they'd previously relaxed because of Han Shua's humor. Now, they were instantly thrown into a bottomless abyss. Everyone's eyes were clouded with gray. They were at a loss as to how to respond. Although Bretel City had experienced the cruelty of war, it had never faced the bloody slaughter of an entire city. Otherwise, Bretel City would have long since become a city of the dead. They wouldn't have just been robbed of their belongings and food, they wouldn't have been able to preserve their lives. Unless one was a bloodthirsty demon or possessed boundless hatred, no one would easily give the order to massacre a city, regardless of whether it was a bandit raid or a war between two countries. This was because doing so would mean the destruction of all life in a city. This was a true bloodbath, not sparing even a chicken or a dog. Such a person would generally receive the condemnation of all countries. Those who dared to massacre a city would be despised and criticized by their own country. The party whose city had been massacred would spare no expense in retaliation. Although the 7 Grand Duchies were constantly at war, the act of massacring a city was extremely rare. Most people wouldn't dare do such a thing. Fas, the leader of the Green Fire Bandits, was no longer bound by any country's restrictions. Faced with Han Shua's arrogant provocation and insults, he couldn't hold back the rage in his heart any longer. Only by slaughtering all life in Bretel City would he be able to wash away the humiliation Han Shua had given him. "Humph, you think you're worthy?" Han Shua snorted coldly from atop the high wall. He turned his head and said to the soldiers beside him, "Bring out the chariots and catapults. I want to see how they die." After the order to massacre the city was given, the green flame flag of the Green Fire Bandits was smeared with a layer of fresh blood, turning it into a blood-red flame. The mages on the wooden frame were slowly pushed towards Bretel City. The 4 ballistae were also pushed forward, loaded with arrows. 2,000 furious bandits were already charging towards Han Shua with ladders, ropes, and iron hooks used to scale the walls. Chariots, ballistae, catapults, kerosene, boulders, and other necessary equipment for defending a city were pushed out from their hiding places under the busy hands of several hundred soldiers. They were divided into different directions and mounted on the wide city wall. However, the number of soldiers was just as small as the number of chariots and ballistae. There were only a few hundred soldiers on the city wall that could accommodate 7,000 to 8,000 people. It was indeed a bit sparse and shabby. Kill! The bandits had already charged over. They felt humiliated and had steeled their hearts to kill everyone in Bretel City. Their leader Fas' face was ashen as he roared somewhat hysterically, "The first brother to reach the city wall will be rewarded with 1,000 gold coins." An enormous magical flame shot from Fas' hand into the sky. This was the signal that the 4 bandit groups had agreed upon beforehand. As the flaming signal shone brilliantly in the sky, the curtains of this siege officially began. The bandits, who'd fainted from the light and fragrance of the gold coins, charged forward with no fear of death, mixed with the rage in their hearts. Han Shua watched them calmly without a word. He waited until they were within firing range before giving the order to the soldiers whose palms were already sweating from nervousness, "Attack." Rumble, 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 the roar of the war chariots resounded throughout the entire city, spewing out tongues of fire. The ballistae and crossbow bolts whizzed through the air, landing on the bandits together with the catapult's boulders. In an instant, an unbearable and tragic scene was created. The places that were sprayed by the war chariots exploded, and severed limbs and heads flew out amidst the billowing dust and blood. The bandits who'd been smashed into meat paste were all smashed into meat paste. The ballistae whizzed past, the powerful impact piercing through several bandits before stopping. Blood flowed like a river in front of Bretel City, and corpses littered the ground. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.